Chapter 601. How nice of you. It's your second day leave, and I haven't seen you except for collecting your packages and eating. Would it kill you to spend a few hours with us? Do I have to invite Camilla to have you grace us with your presence? Alina wasn't happy with his timetable and had no qualms rebuking him. Now I understand why some mages become liches. How am I supposed to spend time with my family, practice magic, help my girlfriend, and continue my research all at the same time? Lith thought. It's impossible. To achieve something, you have to sacrifice something else in return. Solus said, you can always ditch your duty as a ranger and your loved ones. You just have to content yourself in becoming like Zalgrish, who has nothing but his work and a demented assistant. Just the thought of it made Lith shiver. He was still fighting to keep his sanity, and he knew that Solus's had been slipping for years. If he forced her to stay away from any form of human interaction, Lith knew that sooner or later she would snap. He walked to Lucia instead of warping, to take a minute for themselves and appreciate the scenery. Winter in Lucia was about to end, but snow still covered fields and trees. There was no one around, giving Moger a peaceful appearance. When he reached Zekel's workshop, the blacksmith looked really tired. I'm sorry, Lith, but even with Sinan's help this work is huge. Smelting the orichalcum is the easy part. Same for the hammer since I can directly pour the molten metal into the mold. The problem is the chainmail set. I've never worked on something so tough, and I need time to get used to it. I can either work on the chainmail or on the smelting, not both. Zekel had bags under his eyes and a ragged breath. Can Sinton take care of the smelting while you create the chainmails? Lith asked. Yes, of course. I thought you wanted me to do it. Zekel knew that Lith only wanted perfection. Sinton had worked with him for over a decade, but the skill gap between them was still huge. It's fine. Even I can do it, so I doubt someone like him will make any mistake. How many chainmails are ready? Lith asked. 4, but their design is terrible. I'm ashamed of how bad they look, but I couldn't do better with so little time. Zekel lowered his eyes in embarrassment. You are dead tired and 4 are plenty. Take the day off. I have 18 days leave left. I have all that I need for my experiments, and I prefer perfect materials for my real crafts. I want you at your best. Have Sinton keep smelting. I have no idea how many times I will fail. Lith gave Zekel another crate and a few silver coins for his troubles. The blacksmith's eyes shined like stars. His body was full of energy again. No, seriously. Take a rest. Lith placed his hand over Zekel's shoulder to check on his condition with invigoration. The blacksmith was on the verge of collapsing. Zekel nodded with a big yawn. A sprinkle of light magic had relaxed his muscles and burned the last shreds of stamina he had. Zekel was in for a long power nap. Lith took 4 horrible chainmail that looked like they had been made by a child assembling spare keychains and stored them inside his pocket dimension. He thought. Enough is enough. We have to think about the design too. Solus was outraged. Her pride as a craftsman was horrified at the idea to work on something like that. Lith was about to reply when his communication amulet drew his attention. What is it now? This is the busiest leave ever. He groaned, noticing that it was Quilla's rune. Lith, how could you do that to me? Her hologram looked quite pissed off. Do what? It seems I'm pissing off a lot of people these days, so I need you to be more specific. Don't get smart-ass with me. Vaster told me everything since I'm his assistant. Why didn't you call me for help? You know I majored in body sculpting, and I'm working my ass in the field. Quilla said. You are really cute when you're angry. Litha's reply managed to make her turn beet red from a mix of embarrassment and rage. Jokes aside, the case is complicated. I believe in your skills, Quilla. You know I always considered you a genius, but I need the help of an expert. No matter how good you are, you have graduated a year later than me. You have less than 2 years of practice. Even if you healed 1 person per day until now, you would be nowhere near Vaster's level of skill and experience. Messing with a person's brain is a serious matter, and you know it. Quilla took a deep breath. As a friend, she felt insulted, but as a healer, she could only agree with him. Point taken, but after spending a week with Freya, how could you not even give me a call for a consult? I've seen you for just 1 day for almost 2 years. I miss my best friend. Her last words struck at Litha's conscience, making him feel guilty. He also considered once again becoming a lich. I'm sorry. Do you want to join the team? With your talent, you could spot any issue Vaster or I could miss. Maybe even find an easier way to treat Xenia. I'd be honored to. Her anger disappeared like a snowball thrown into the sun. By the way, you absolutely have to teach me how to create holograms. The level of detail in the patient's model was astounding. There was a bit too much enthusiasm in her voice, making even Solus wonder if she missed more Lith or his teachings. How is it going with Anathor? Lith promptly changed the topic. Oh gods, you remembered. Very well. He finally mustered the courage to meet my parents. I was starting to think he was just playing with my feelings, but it turns out he was just scared. He almost fainted facing Dad's gaze. She chuckled. Glad to hear that, but don't lower your guard. He might still be a jerk. You deserve someone who treats you right. Otherwise you'll end up with a jerk like my current patient. Lith warped back to Tron before telling her about Zinya's background. Poor woman. Her situation couldn't be any worse. Between her husband and her condition, it's hard to tell which one is worse. She said, Any ideas? Well, I read a lot of papers and I agree with your evaluation. Her case is as bad as she was missing part of her spine. What makes this case difficult is that the problem doesn't lie in a malfunctioning part of her body, but in a complete lack of it. Creating an optic nerve is very dangerous. Things can go wrong when you create it, and also when you link it to her life force. Both times you have to manipulate her brain. The slightest mistake could affect her personality, her memories, everything. Asking Vaster for help was the best thing you could do. I'm forwarding you all the papers on similar procedures I found. Watching at the double digits appearing on his communication amulet, Lith was glad to have such a dear friend. Quilla had done a thorough job, giving him everything he needed. He also was once again glad of having Solispedia. He only needed to write all that stuff down with water magic to save himself 2 days' worth of reading. Chapter 602. Lith and Solus needed only a few minutes to put on paper all the information Quilla had sent them. After that, Solispedia did the rest. Once something was stored inside of it, they knew its content by heart, as if they had an eidetic memory. Lith and Solus discussed together all the possible approaches to give Zinya's sight, taking into account the degree of risk/success rate each procedure involved. Even though none of those who have the fewest failures have shared their spells, they all described in detail how they work. Thanks to true magic, we can follow their lead and even combine their techniques together. Lith thought. They spent a few hours using holograms to simulate the procedure. Lith created a replica of his own optic nerve while Solus would tweak and twist the hologram at random to cause complications he had to deal with on the spot. All the while he actually used scanner on both himself and Solus while using chisel on the hologram. Triple casting tier 5 spells while keeping the hologram active proved to be quite tiring. Damn it, this is hard. I made over 30 attempts, succeed 12 times, partially succeeded 5 times, failed 11 times, and killed Zinya at least 4 times. Lith said, Calm down. This is the first time we deal with such a complex case. You got too used to true magic making healing the impossible possible. Don't forget that you are working non-stop since you returned home. Follow your own advice and take the day off. Tomorrow we'll practice the procedure until we are satisfied with the results. Now it's too late, and you are too tired. There are less than 2 hours before you have to be at Camilla's place. Solus's wisp rubbed against his shoulder, spreading her mana around him in a warm embrace. I think you are right. Lith replied. I'll take the day off as soon as I'm done with the Skinwalker. He warped inside his forge mastering lab, taking the Welmert hammer and the keychain mail out of his pocket dimension. He placed them over his obsidian forge while Solus demonstrated an outstanding creativity in mixing English and common language insults to express her feelings about Lith's stubbornness. First, he used invigoration to go back to what was now his peak condition. With just an hour nap, and after practicing the medical procedure many times, invigoration wouldn't last for long. Necro or Bloom Forge? Lith asked. Neither. Go to sleep, damn it. Necro it is, Lith said, making her emit a loud and unladylike groan. Lith had acquired the blueprints for the Skinwalker armor when the crown had elevated him to the status of Great Mage. They had even provided him with all the ingredients needed to make a new one. Yet only now that he also had the orichalcum at hand, he had the opportunity to improve its properties. Tista had already received her own as a reward for her services in Other, whereas the rest of the family had no need for it. Not after Lith had given them all of his Skinwalker prototypes and forge-mastered for them magical protections in the form of rings, bracelets, or necklaces. Whenever people ask me why I joined the army, I always have to spew a bunch of lies about how much I love the kingdom. The truth is that it's much better than the alternative. I get to rake merits, rewards, and get paid for it. To obtain ingredients, I would be forced to travel Mogar with my own money and risk my life. Not to mention the necessity of doing missions for the association to obtain the blueprints. This way, all expenses are covered and I get everything I need delivered to my door. Every time I solve a mission, the army rewards me with ingredients according to its difficulty. Sure, usually they are not as precious as orichalcum, but it would still be hard and expensive to get them on my own. Lith said while taking the ingredients for the skinwalker out. It required the skin of a polymorphic monster species known as skinwalker, hence its name. It also needed a bit of slime goop as a stabilizer, powdered petals of magma flower as a power core, and a thunderbird's plume to boost the base material's defensive properties. Thunderbirds had sturdy feathers as hard as iron, and their affinity to lightning granted them a natural electromagnetic field capable of weakening most attacks. The last ingredient to forge master a skinwalker armor was the pseudo-core of a dimensional storage item that would be merged with those generated by the rest of the ingredients. First, Lith used the bonding spell to fuse a blue mana crystal with the keychain mail. Then, Solus powered up the forge mastering circle as Lith refined the ingredients one by one. The skin, the powder, and the feather were all flooded by his mana. It revived and amplified their magical nature while destroying their physical vessels. They produced a rainbow-colored, a red, and a yellow pseudo-core respectively. After Lith was certain that all the residual magical energy had been extracted from the ingredients and assimilated by the pseudo-cores, he generated the last one. A skinwalker armor required a dimensional subspace to store the clothes that it would reproduce. Lith had forge-mastered countless dimensional items over the years, so he threw the dimensional core just a glance to make sure it was perfect. Lith raised his arms, bringing the four pseudo-cores close to each other until they started to emit sparks. At that point, he refined the slime goop. Slimes were incredible creatures, with amazing vitality and capable of adapting to any environment. The goop didn't produce another core, but a fine mist that filled the forge mastering circle. The mist harmonized the different energies of the pseudo-cores, allowing Lith to merge them into one. Then, keychain mail and the pseudo-core started to orbit around each other. The orichalcum started to resonate with the mystical energy, making the pseudo-core grow in size and power. Fuck me sideways. That never happened before. It must be due to the interaction between the orichalcum's artificial mana flow and the Thunderbird's amplification field. Lith thought. He stimulated his own mana core, boosting its energies until his body started to ache from mana overloading. Solus called upon the energies of the mana geyser, filling the necro hammer with mana to allow Lith to exceed his limits. The armor rejected the pseudo-core until Lith struck the forge mastering circle with the hammer, producing a silvery sound. It released a deep blue burst of light that was captured by the circle and channeled into the ongoing spell. Lith's mana and willpower pushed the pseudo-core inside the keychain mail, allowing it to overcome the resistance the mana coming from the blue produced. As soon as Lith was overcharged again, he hit the circle a second time, generating another burst of light. With each strike, the merging process became easier and faster. Damn it, I think we messed up. We created a pseudo-core just as strong as the one in the hammer, but this time it's much more complex. I cannot regenerate it and continue the merging at the same time. Lith thought. Solus stepped in to help him, but between keeping the hammer charged and powering the circle, her focus was already spent. They fought against the odds for half an hour before the pseudo-core collapsed and the blue mana crystal shattered. Chapter 603. I can't believe it. I've worked on the armor for less than an hour, and I'm way more tired than after we crafted the hammer. Lith said while checking his pocket watch. It's perfectly normal. The hammer required a single core, whereas this time you fused 4 cores of the same power together. Solus said. Handling that kind of energy for an hour while repairing any deformation the clash between 5 different kinds of mana induced is much more difficult than working 6 hours and a half on a single core. By the way, I'm beat too. I need time to recuperate. Solus wheezed. Lith had never heard of a tower being out of breath, but he could feel the energy in the tower being somewhat diminished. We'll continue tomorrow. Lith said, "What about Zinya's procedure?" "Fine. The day after tomorrow. You have an appointment with Vaster scheduled for that day," Solus said, making Lith erupt in a streak of swear words. Lith went inside the bathroom for a long bath. He had over an hour of time and planned to make it count. He arrived at Camilla's early, using the time before she returned home to run simulations with Solus to understand how to compensate for the unexpected complication. The boost the final pseudo-core receives from the orichalcum makes it impossible for us to succeed. What if we lower the output of 30%? Lith thought. It would be enough if we were using a single core. There's 4 of them, so you have to take into account the energy necessary to keep them both merged and in the correct shape. I'd start with 50%. It leaves you enough mana in case another unexpected complication arises. 50%? It's a waste of blue crystals, orichalcum, and ingredients. Lith rebuked. Yeah, but so is another failure. 50% is a reasonable amount and allows us to test the waters. If we succeed, at least we'll have a starting point, whereas another failure would teach us nothing. Lith was pondering Solus's words so hard that he completely missed Camilla's arrival. Seeing him brooding with a dejected look threw her into a panic. "Lith, are you all right? It's everything okay with your family?" Knowing his talent at risking his life at least once a day, she was worried he could be hurt. She touched his shoulder, chest, and arms searching for injuries. "I'm fine and so is my family, don't worry." His answer only made her worry more since he kept staring blankly. Light magic could heal any kind of wound, but not those to his wallet. Lith was almost grieving for his most recent failure. Is it for Zinya? Is her situation so bad? Did Falmug beat her or something? She shook him, to force Lith looking her in the eyes while answering. No, no, and no. He checked his communication amulet, just to be safe. Then what's the matter? Speak to me, please, she asked. Seeing how worried she was for him, almost on the verge of tears, made Lith feel like a jerk. I can't tell her I'm grieving for a failed experiment. She would think I'm a self-centered, stingy idiot. Solus analysis. He thought. If you ever plan to reveal to her at least as much as you did with Floria, you can't hide your flaws. Just be honest with her. Besides, she already knows about the stinginess and you're not very self-centered. She giggled. Lith told her the truth. She waited patiently until he finished expressing his gripes before saying, Idiot, you made me worry for nothing. All according to Kikaku. Solus thought, I'm really sorry about your materials, but the important thing is that nothing happened to you. She sat on Lith's lap, putting her arms around his neck before giving him a soft kiss. Lith returned her embrace and his arms ran along Camilla's hair and hips, making her arch her back in pleasure. They started to kiss with growing passion, forgetting all about their daily worries as electricity seemed to course through their skin every time they touched. Is it better now? She said. Her voice was a soft moan, making his morale raise among other things. Very much. I'm too tired to cook and I assumed it would be the same for you, so I reserved a table for us at the Valorian. We need to hurry, otherwise we'll get late, she said while standing up. She noticed his disappointed expression and quickly added, It's barely 7 p.m., silly. We have all evening and night. We didn't have a date in weeks and I really miss your company. Would you have dinner with me? My treat, so you'll forget about your financial losses. She chuckled. I'm okay going out for dinner, but not with you paying the bill. Lith replied, and his stomach grumbled in approval. Even if it had been a failure, the forge mastering experiment had drained his energy. It's my treat to apologize for giving you a scare. Also, it's not like saving a few copper coins can hurt after having already lost around 20 gold coins. That without taking the orichalcum into account, since it has no market price. His words made Camilla choke on her laugh. 20 gold coins was more than Manohar would ask to treat Zinya's blindness. A single gold coin was worth 100 silver coins. Even a constable was paid in silver. The amount Lith described was enough to buy a house. That much. Suddenly his gloomy disposition was much more relatable. Yes, but I'm likely to waste more. One has to fail a lot before succeeding. He sighed. The food was nice and the wine excellent. Lith told Camilla about Alina's gripes on his work schedule and her intentions of kidnapping her if he didn't spend more time with his family. Tell her that I'm okay with that. She just has to knock out my boss, and I'm all hers, Camilla said. Between the cheery mood and Camilla's soothing presence, Lith was finally able to relax after weeks of unrelenting work, fight, or training. His body felt light, and the anxiety that had been clouding his mind during the last 2 days disappeared. Man, I'm so glad we got out for dinner. I really needed a break. Lith thought. Yeah, I wonder where I heard those same exact words before. Oh yeah, it was me. You just didn't listen, like usual. Solus was pissed off, yet she took note of all the ideas that were popping in Litha's now clear mind. I'm sorry to ruin the mood, but I have to tell you, Camilla said. What you did today for Zinnia was amazing. I brought you with me because I wanted you to reassure her, but you did so much more. You gave my sister hope and even allowed her to see me for the first time. I can't thank you enough for that. I've never thought I'd see Zinnia so happy. It meant the world for me. You're not ruining anything. When my sister was ill, I felt the same as you do, Lith said, giving her the strength to ask the question that had tormented her since yesterday. Is it everything all right between us? Camilla asked. What do you mean? Lith had no idea what she was talking about. Chapter 604. I know how things must seem to you. That I dated you only to get a freebie for my sister. I never meant to hide how bad her situation is from you. It's just that it's not something I like to talk about. I wouldn't have even bothered you with it if you weren't the best healer I know, and now that I'm a field assistant constable, I can afford the treatment. I can pay you, so nothing has to change between us. I'm not trying to exploit you. Camilla said. Gods, my paranoia is really rubbing off on you. I never thought anything like that. I too had a lot of things from you. I know all too well how difficult it is to speak about a painful past. Only those who want to garner pity from others would speak of such things on a first date. I'm glad that you asked for my help, because it means you trust me enough to share your burden with me. I'm even more glad to hear about all the silly thoughts running through your head, because it means you are not taking me for granted. Lith gently caressed her hand. I wish I was that strong. I have yet to tell her about my hybrid nature. I can't tell her about awakening and true magic, but if things get really serious, I can't make the same mistakes Protector did. He thought. Thanks. Camilla sighed in relief, feeling her worries fading. The thought that you might be doubting about my feelings was eating at me since yesterday. To be honest, it's the reason I avoided she said while the waitress brought them desserts. The conversation moved again to their respective days' work and silly anecdotes about their lives. When they went to Camilla's apartment, Lith was happy, relaxed, and most of all, sleepy. I had too much wine. I'll go take a quick shower to clear my head, and I'll join you as soon as I slip into something more comfortable, Camilla said. Tomorrow I have a full day, and today I've used invigoration so much that all my body aches. With a full stomach and considering how tired I am, I'd better avoid making advances. Besides, things with Camilla will be awkward for a while, at least until we solve Zinnia's problem. Heck, I'm too tired even for theory crafting magic. He thought as the skinwalker shape-shifted into his pajama. Lith checked with life vision that nothing was out of order and that there was no unknown magical item before being able to relax. He fell asleep the moment his head touched the pillow. It didn't last long, though. A sudden flash of light and a mildly amused voice woke him up after what seemed a second. What are you doing? There was a tinge of annoyance in Camilla's voice. Isn't it obvious? I was sleeping. Lith shielded his eyes from the cruel light with a hand. After how you kissed me when I returned home. After what I said earlier. What happened to your math skills? She was tapping her foot, her hands on her hips. What are you good gods? Litha's mind recalled her earlier words as his vision returned to normal. Camilla was standing in front of the door wearing only red lace lingerie. It made wonders emphasizing her pale skin and soft curves. During his time as assistant professor at the academy, Lith had used the White Griffin network to patent the underwear he had plagiarized from Earth. It hadn't been the success he had hoped for, except for the women underwear, of course. Lith had gifted Camilla a few for their amorous plays, and she was now wearing his favorite one. But yesterday you said. Yesterday we had to talk, silly. She crawled on the bed on all four with deliberately slow, sensual movements, showing miles of cleavage. Didn't you miss me? Even one bit. She said before giving him a peck that tasted like heaven. Lith turned off the lights with a snap of his fingers before taking her into his arms. They started to kiss while feeling each other's body. Lith took his time to appreciate the feeling of the lace covering her skin before removing it slowly, one bit at the time. Thanks, Math. I knew you wouldn't relinquish me. The next morning, After they had breakfast together and Camilla left home, Lith went back to Lucia. He took Belius's warp gate to leave a trace of his movements, and then used Solus's tower warp to reach his destination and sleep. Camilla was fine because he had shared with her a bit of his life force, but they had slept too little and invigoration's effects had yet to reset. For hours later, Lith was back at his full force and practiced Zinya's procedure until it was lunchtime. His parents were very happy to have him with them for a while, even more when he chose to stay a bit longer after lunch. Lith told them about his latest mission, everything that wasn't a state secret. "I'm glad to hear that Freya is doing well," Alina said. "Yeah, too bad that girl is a workaholic just like you. You didn't see each other since Journey's birthday, and yet you spent the entire time practicing magic. You need to relax, son," Raz said. "It's what I'm doing now, right?" Lith used spirit magic to play with Aaron, moving some of his toy soldiers and engaging him in a fierce battle. "Why did you pick the beanpole instead of Aunt Freya?" "She's a babe," Aaron said with a pensive tone. Some words made little sense to him, so he had a hard time remembering them. "Raz, Dad," Alina and Lith said in unison. The only way Aaron could say such things was by hearing those words from someone else, and often at that. "Guilty as charged." Raz showed his hands, surrendering. "I'm sorry, but I never understood how you pick your girlfriends. Even when you two just met, Floria was already very tall. Taller than me, and even than you. Also she's too." Raz was almost too embarrassed to finish the sentence. "Strong?" Lith asked. He knew that his father was still shocked after losing to her in many strength contests. As far as Raz knew, Floria was stronger than Lith as well. "Yes, a woman shouldn't be so intimidating. Now you have Camilla. She's lovely, sure, but she's old." Alina's voice was so cold that it made the temperature in the room plummet. "If Camilla is old, then what am I?" she thought. "Oh, older than Lith, dear. Whereas Freya is about the right age, height, and is a wonderful woman. A father has all the right to worry about his eldest son," Raz said. His voice became low and sour. "Eldest son? What about Tryon?" Lith didn't miss either Raz's tone nor Alina turning pale. "Dear, I told you it had to wait," she said. "Sorry, honey. I didn't mean to." He sighed. "Your brother came here a few days before Journey's birthday, when only your mother, Aaron, and I were at home. Things didn't go well. Our reunion started badly, and things escalated quickly. Long story short, he disowned us and is no longer a member of our family." Chapter 605. Tryon had never forgotten his promise to Lith, mostly because he was afraid that his brother would barge in his base and humiliate him again. It still took him months to find the strength to go back home. He loved his parents with all his heart, and that was the reason seeing them was much harder than continue to avoid the unresolved issues he had with his family. Tryon had thought for a long time about Orpal's fate before realizing that by endangering their baby brother's life, he had crossed the line. Thanks to the life in the army and the camaraderie with his peers, Tryon had realized that what he had with his older brother was a sick relationship. Orpal always ordered him around, and they rarely argued simply because Tryon obeyed to him. He didn't resent his parents anymore for disowning his beloved older brother, yet the more he thought about it, the less home felt like a home. His parents had never loved him any less than Lith, but he was tired of being always compared to his little brother. Tired of being painfully often referred to as Lith's brother rather than with his name. The army gave him a place where he could be himself, where the shadow of his brother couldn't reach him anymore. That was the reason he had never returned home. Even if Lith was always at the academy, his presence had tainted the whole Lucia. In her letters, after asking Tryon to reply to her and let her know he was all right, Alina would always mention how the village had expanded, how their house was being renovated, until the house he remembered was no more. Things became even worse for Tryon each time Lith made a name for himself. The plague in Candria, single-handedly facing a valor, becoming a top ranker, they were all events that reached every corner of the Griffin Kingdom, barracks included. Every time Tryon heard people praising Lith for his achievements, despite him being a nameless commoner, he couldn't help but be jealous. If there's one thing Orpal was right about is how unfair it is that no one cares about our hard work. No one praises me for my efforts, nor anyone cares for how well I'm doing in the army. Lith only has to move his hands while spouting bullshit, and everyone blows smoke up his ass. He would often think. When Lith received a family name from the king himself, Tryon learned about it the worst possible way. A lieutenant asked him if he wanted to take the Verhen name in front of the whole mess hall. Suddenly Tryon was no more, and in the blink of an eye his name became Lith's brother, Verhen. Tryon had to ask to be relocated and buy a family name, Proudstar, to avoid being associated with the Verhen again. He regretted what he did to Floria, but no matter how deep he buried his hatred, it was always there, smoldering. Any mention of his brother's name, no matter the reason, was enough to rekindle it into a blazing fire again. When Tryon returned home, it was exactly as he feared. The house was unrecognizable, and so was the village. Most of the farmhands had no idea who he was, and those who did spit on the ground at his passage. If you were my son and you made my Liza cry as much as Alina did for you, I'd kick your ass back to where you came from. Broman said, eager to tell about Tryon past to whoever asked him who that sergeant was. Tryon had yet to set foot inside his home, and he was already full of venom. He was thinking about throwing the thousands of miles he had crossed into the gutter when the door opened. Raz immediately recognized him and held his long-lost son into an embrace. "Welcome home, son," was all he managed to say while fighting his tears back. Hearing those words, Alina too rushed to the door, joining the embrace as tears of joy streamed down her face. In that moment, Tryon remembered how much he loved his parents and all the wonderful things they had shared. "I missed you so much, Tryon," Alina said between sobs. "I missed you too, Mom. Sorry for not visiting for so long," he said, letting go of his past grievances. Unluckily, they all flooded back the moment his eyes looked at his right, where once there was his old room. It had been replaced by a pantry years ago. He ignored his parents' question about his friends and career, asking in anger, "What the heck happened here? Where's my room?" "Don't worry, sweetie. We haven't thrown away anything. Your room is on the second floor, like everyone else's," Alina said. "What has become of Litha's study? Is it now a laundry room, or what?" he asked with way more emphasis than necessary. "Litha's study is still there, just like Rena's. Lith sometimes brings his girlfriend home, and Rena is married now. They deserve a bit of privacy," Raz explained. It made perfect sense, especially considering that Lith had paid for all the renovations with his own money, yet Tryon lived it as an unfair treatment. "Come in, dear. Have a seat. We have so much catch-up to do." Alina took hot tea and freshly baked pastries out of her dimensional ring, leaving Tryon flabbergasted. Now the kitchen and the dining room were two separate rooms. Every piece of furniture was of good quality. The house was warm and without a single draft, with more magical tools than the apartments Tryon lived in. With every step he took, he felt alien to that place. Only his parents gave him the strength to sit down and fight the rage that was consuming him. "Who is this man, Mom?" a small voice asked. Tryon had heard about Aaron from both Floria and Lith, yet he still couldn't believe his own eyes. He had always thought that giving birth to a demon like Lith had made her barren. Secretly, he found solace at that thought, like it was some kind of divine justice balancing the scale. "Sweetie, come meet your brother Tryon." Alina held him in her arms. "I've only one brother," Aaron stubbornly said. "Forgive him, Tryon. Aaron is barely 4 years old and has never met you before. You know how kids are." Her tone was apologetic, but Alina never stopped smiling nor her eyes sparkling while looking at the little miracle in her arms. "Don't worry, Mom, it's fine." He blatantly lied, making it clear that he resented the small child. "Tell me everything about you, son. How are things in the army? Do you have someone special?" Raz asked. "Sorry, Dad. I'm not as good as Lith. I'm not married, nor do I have a girlfriend. After all, even after working my ass off for years, I'm just a staff sergeant, whereas he is a mighty mage who became a lieutenant right off the bat. Why would anyone be interested in a nobody like me?" he said while slamming his hand on the table. "Tryon, I'm not making comparisons. I just want to know how you are," Raz said while Alina tried to calm down Aaron. He didn't like strangers, even more those who yelled. Chapter 606. How do you think I can possibly be? Tryon stood up abruptly, flipping his chair. "This isn't my house anymore. You got rid of my room as if it was trash, yet you kept Lith's intact. Everything here stinks of him. Your rings, your clothes, even him," he said while pointing at Aaron, making him cry. "We didn't get rid of anything. Our room and Tista's are on the second floor, just like yours. What's wrong with this house? With your brother, Aaron? This is a good place where we have a good life," Alina said, her heart hurt by Tryon's words. Of course the trash goes on the second floor, where it can't offend His Majesty's eyes. I'll tell you what's wrong. You cut me out of your lives to the point that I had to learn from a stranger that I had a brother. I never stopped writing to you, but my letters were always returned. According to the army, there was no Tryon nor Tryon Verhen. And there never will be. Tryon yelled, cutting Alina short. I'm Tryon Proudstar now. It's clear that as long as you have your precious Lith, you have no need for a failure of a son like me. I better be off before I waste more of your time. He walked towards the door, but Raz grabbed him by the shoulder. Son, what's this madness? Why do you always talk about Lith? What did he ever do to you? We don't love Rena any less just because she's not a mage. If you are trash, then what about her? What about us? Easy. You're worse than trash, and I don't need you anymore. Don't bother teaching the runt my name. If I'm not a member of this family, I might as well be disowned too. Even better, I'll disown you. So at least I'll spare you the inconvenience to kick me out. He said before storming out of the house. Lith's house. Present day. After Raz finished telling him the whole story, Lith took a deep breath before saying, I'm sorry it ended up that way. Yet he was sorry for his parents, not for Tryon. He had always considered his older brother a lost cause. Me too, dear. Alina sighed. Do you want me to go talk to him? Lith asked. No, it would only make things worse. Thanks, though. Raz said. I think it's partly our fault. After what happened with Orpal, we have been so overprotective towards Tista that we failed to notice the hole that losing his big brother opened in Tryon's heart. Maybe if instead of just trying to forget about our lost son, we spent more time with him, trying to explain Tryon why Orpal had to go, things would have gone differently. No offense, Dad, but I call bullshit. After Orpal was disowned, you did the best you could and so did everyone else, even me. Lith said, Why do you say that, dear? You've always been a perfect brother. Alina said, No, I wasn't. I never liked my brothers and you know it. They couldn't miss how everyone in the family improved their looks after receiving my treatments, and they knew I wouldn't do the same for them. By forcing you to keep such an open secret, I created a divide between you and them that further fueled their jealousy. Yet their actions are still inexcusable. Neither Orpal nor Tryon ever apologized. Tryon has been loved, well-fed, and dressed his whole life. I didn't love them, but you and Rena did. They had everything they needed, yet it was never enough. I never bullied nor humiliated them by showing off my powers. I always minded my own business, asking the same from them. Their problem has always been that their abilities didn't match their expectations. Even after all these years, the only person Tryon worries about is Tryon. He didn't ask about Rena or Tista, right? Both of his parents shook their heads. Always a self-centered apple. Lith corrected himself while looking at Aaron. Mom, Dad, you've been two wonderful parents and whoever says otherwise is a liar, stupid, or both. He stood up and hugged them both, hoping to better convey his feelings. Maybe you're right, son, but it's a parent's job to take care of their children, even when they are lost. Raz said. Lith went back to Solas's tower to use its empowering effects to learn more about the methods his most successful colleagues had used in the past. Creating the optic nerve from scratch was simple. Lith only had to use Camilla as a blueprint and Zinya's flesh and blood as materials. Them being sisters made their physiology similar enough that what worked for Camilla was supposed to work for Zinya too. The problem was that the new tissues and nerve endings would occupy an already taken place, so the problem was twofold. Connecting the optic nerve to both eyes and brain without harming either and make space for them without mutilating the patient. Lith tried different approaches, working on his holograms while keeping active both scanner and chisel for hours. His success rate improved dramatically with practice and observation, but in the end, they were just simulations. Lith had never manipulated life force to that extent. He kept revising all the material Quilla had sent to him and spent the rest of the time studying the life force of his own optic nerve. Damn it, even if I kidnap Falmug and experiment on him, it would be pointless. He's a healthy subject, whereas I'd need one with Zinya's condition. He thought. We can only hope that Vaster has an ace in the hole. Otherwise it might be better to let him operate while we watch. Solas proposed. It's a good idea, but I'd feel more comfortable with him making space for the optic nerve and then connecting it to the rest, while I do everything else. Vaster is an outstanding mage, but a fake mage nonetheless. If something goes wrong, I can fix it faster and better than Litha's thoughts were interrupted by his communication amulet. A single, long beep warned him that shit had just hit the fan. City of Zilida, a few minutes ago. Falmug Sarda was fuming with rage like he hadn't been in months. The day before he had noticed that something was wrong, but he had paid it no heed. His stupid servants were always jumpy around him for no reason, and that stupid wench of Vilna was just an attention whore. Only after noticing that even his neighbors threw odd glances at him had Falmug decided it was time to get some answers. It didn't take him long to learn about Camilla's second visit. The house staff was much more terrified of losing their job than of a random mage. Lith was gone, whereas they had to live there. Their families depended on their job, and getting fired without receiving good references would have meant having no future. Why you didn't send her away? Have you forgotten what I have instructed you to tell that cunt? Falmug's face was centimeters away from Vilna's, his lips curled in outrage. I wanted to, but there was a great mage with her. Who cares about a mage? That was an abuse of authority. You should have called the guards. Falmug hated Camilla's guts. Not only did the little wench always reject him, but also now that she had her new boyfriend, she was the only thing his family would talk about. Chapter 607. I couldn't, he was too scary. Even after he left, it took me hours to recover. Vilna said. At those words, Falmug slapped her so hard that she was sent slamming against the nearest wall. Her head started to spin due to the slap and the impact. Enough of your excuses. With all the money I waste on you, is it too much to ask for a bit of loyalty? He lifted her by the collar of her shirt and slapped her again. Vilna's cheek turned purple and her lips started to bleed. Was he scarier than me? Another slap followed, making her cry. What about now? Are you still scared of him? Falmug threw her on the ground before kicking her over and over, until her whining stopped. I work my ass to give to all you parasites a good life, and that's how you repay me? With lies and betrayal? Do you have any idea how difficult it is to be a successful businessman with all those foreigners using the gate to sell their merchandise, even during winter? Falmug Sarda hadn't always been the man he was now. Back before the warp gate had been opened, he was the young master of a powerful and rich household of merchants. He had inherited the family business and made it thrive thanks to his charismatic personality and the network of connections that his predecessors had established. With time, his pride turned into arrogance and his self-confidence into conceit. After the gate, though, his life had become a daily battle to the death with his competition. He had never been a very kind man, so being forced to be nice and patient during work always caused a great deal of stress on him. He had managed to hold his rage in until the money flowed into his pockets and the community respected him for it. Now, though, each victory came at a price. Also, every single time he was defeated despite putting so much effort into the negotiations, despite the many personal sacrifices he endured, his pride was wounded and something inside him became more twisted. He had started by beating his servants, but only with an occasional slap and only after a really bad day. Then, he had started to do it just to relieve his stress. Seeing them suffer made Falmug feel better about himself. It made him feel powerful. He wasn't proud of it, but the business was better for it, and he cleared his conscience by giving them gifts every time he closed a good deal. Yet the more he gave into his darkest impulses, the more things got worse. Soon he started to beat his wife whenever she pestered him with her whining about him being too hard with the house staff or the kids' schooling. Then it was the turn of those little runts, who disrespected his hard work and never let him have a single moment of peace. No matter how much he scolded them, they seemed to remain oblivious of the sacrifices he made for them every day. They would always drive him crazy with their squeaky voices and stupid laughs whenever they played. He couldn't stand them being so happy at his expenses, even less to spend his hard-earned money, just for being subject to their terrified expression whenever they met. He was their father, yet they treated him like he was a monster. Now Camilla, that stupid woman, had dared to violate the sanctity of his house twice, defying his orders and will. Someone has to pay, Falmug said while walking towards the tea room. He slammed the door open, his voice a low rumble like a thunder announcing a storm. Didn't I tell you not to see your sister without my permission again? Have you gone deaf as well, or are you just too stupid to understand a simple order? Zinnia gulped in fear. She was waiting for Falmug to continue his ranting, but the prolonged silence meant his questions weren't rhetorical for once. I didn't invite Cammy. She came here on her own, and Vilna let her in. She clenched a small, red stick in her hands, trying not to stutter. It would only make Falmug angrier. Did you tell her that whatever happens now it's on her? He asked. I did, but she stayed. Good. Your sister should have followed your example. A married woman learns about obedience and discipline, whereas a spinster doesn't realize that each action has consequences. I'm sorry, dear, but you'll have to pay the price for your sister's defiance. Falmug took out the horsewhip from his jacket's pocket, making it snap against his palm. Please, don't. She did nothing wrong. She was just worried for me. Zinnia now clenched the stick with both hands. She had no reason to. Didn't I always take good care of you? He stepped forward as the whip cracked on his palm again. Stay away. There's a reason I never stepped out of this room. What might it be? His tone went from cold to angry. He hated it when people ordered him around. Zinnia broke the red stick, which was actually a red mana crystal. 6 more were hidden from sight under a couch and arranged to form a small array that became visible to the naked eye. He's coming. Lith promised me, Zinnia said. Really? Falmug laughed as he grabbed Zinnia by the collar of her dress, forcing her to stand up. Even if he lived in Zillida, it would take him minutes to get here, and he doesn't. He lives in Distar. By the time he gets here, there will be nothing to find. A healer friend of mine will make sure of it. He may be a mage, but in this house, I'm your god. Zinnia sobbed as 2 strong hands grabbed Falmug's arms with enough strength to shatter them, forcing him to let her go. Yet she heard nothing because of the hush zone enveloping her husband. Get over here. Lith dragged him inside the dimensional fissure leading to the mirror's hall on the tower's first floor. The moment the array had been activated, Solus had warped the tower to the nearest mana geyser, while Lith focused on Zinnia's room coordinates through the warping mirror, which amplified his warp steps range. Hello, Ezio. Long time no see, Lith said while giving him a backhand slap. It broke Falmug's jaw and spread his nose all over his face, sending him crashing against the nearest wall. Please, stop. My name is not Ezio. Falmug whined. Tears of pain were streaming down his eyes. I know, and that's the only reason you'll get out of here alive. Litha's fist struck Falmug's chest, making his ribcage and lungs collapse. Falmug fell to the floor, coughing out blood. For a few terrible moments, he thought he was about to die, but the pain slowly faded and he could breathe again. What the? Falmug could lift his arms, now perfectly healed. His nose and jaw were back to their original state, and so was his chest. Magic, Lith explained with a laugh as the mirrors disappeared and an array became visible to the naked eye. I gifted you an immortal body, the dream of countless kings and emperors, all for you. Lithas grabbed Falmug by the neck, slamming him against the stone pavement. His skull shattered, his spine was severed, leaving him limp like a stringless marionette. Immortal doesn't mean invulnerable, though. You can still feel pain. You just cannot die while we are having fun. Chapter 608. The array enveloping the first floor of Solus's tower was something they had developed in case Lith managed to find a mana geyser while being on the brink of death. It allowed Solus to harness the energy of the mana geyser to heal all kinds of wounds almost instantly and to share part of her life force with invigoration. The final result was a powerful healing field capable of beating death as long as the subject's mana core was intact. In Falmug's case, however, Solus wasn't giving him any life force. Lith refused to have her tainting her noble spirit with such a human-faced monster. Falmug's spine recovered, and so did his limbs. He was seconds away from fainting due to exhaustion when Lith used invigoration to restore his life force. Lith wouldn't let him get any respite. Even healing was an excruciating process since Solus was performing it without any kind of anesthesia. The bone fragments would dig through the flesh and blood vessels to return to their original position, opening new wounds at their passage. Falmug could feel his body constantly get torn apart and reconstructed. How does it feel, Ezio? Lith waited for him to have completely recovered before crushing his windpipe with a fist to the throat. How does it feel to be helpless against someone much bigger and stronger than you are? Falmug couldn't even breathe, let alone reply. His vision blurred before the array allowed him to breathe in fresh air again. How does it feel walking a mile in your children's shoes? A flick of Litha's finger and one of Falmug's nails flew off, spraying blood through the room as he screamed in agony. Your voice is definitely high-pitched for a god. The nail was still regrowing. biting the flesh on its way when another flew off. Falmug kept screaming, holding his right hand to defend it, just to have the fingernails on the left hand be ripped off all at once. The pain almost sent him into shock, but Solus's healing and Litha's life force saved his life again. Any last words? You will not get away with this. If I disappear, then what? Who would even care? Your wife? Your children? Your family? Lith stomped on Falmug's kneecap with enough strength to almost cut the leg into two. The kingdom will never. Falmug attempted to say as soon as the pain allowed him to. Wrong. Lith stomped on the other leg, cutting him short and making Falmug grateful to the gods for giving him only 2 legs. The kingdom wouldn't give a damn, but death is too good for the likes of you. I will turn you into your wife. Litha's fingers shape-shifted into claws, piercing Falmug's eyes all the way to the brain. Just like she is your plaything, you shall be mine. I will beat you an inch from death every single day and then send you home unscathed. No one will hear your screams. Lith slammed his open palms against Falmug's ears, destroying his eardrums. Falmug lost control of his bladder as his world was now pitch black and devoid of sound. Solus only healed his ears to make him feel like Xenia did every day of her life. No one will witness what I'll do to you. Litha's knee struck Falmug's nether regions, turning his genitals into toothpaste. No matter who you ask for help, they'll just think you're crazy. No one will believe you. A jet of origin flames set Falmug ablaze as Solus kept the healing speed fast enough to keep him alive despite the flames eating his ever-regenerating flesh. Lith went outside, using his army amulet to create himself an alibi. The amulet pinpointed his position while he asked for updates from Commander Barian. The army would be his witness, stating that he was at his own house if anyone asked. When Lith returned to the tower, the flames were gone and Falmug was unconscious. His body couldn't take any more punishment without eating. Solus said, "Well done." Litha's voice was joyless. He hated the idea of letting him live, but his disappearance would make Camilla ask questions he didn't want to lie about. They brought Falmug back in the tea room and prepared a new alarm array, this time above a cupboard. I always keep my promises, Lith said while embracing Xenia and giving her another stick to replace the one she had consumed. What about Falmug? She asked. He is all right, but I doubt he'll touch you again for a long, long time. Between his studies at the academy and the time spent with Journey, Lith was an expert about the human body and mind. It would take Falmug days to recover from the physical exhaustion, but the mental trauma would last much longer, whereas he would return the following day to bring Xenia to the academy's hospital to prepare her for the procedure. If anything happens, you know what to do. Remember, if anyone asks, I've not been here. Thank you so much. Xenia buried her face into his chest. He might be a monster, but he's still the father of my children. Believe me, they are better off with their mother. Giving guys like him a second chance will bite back at you sooner or later. I'll pick you up tomorrow, so rest easy but keep the trigger always with you. Once you stop hearing my voice, count up to 10, and then use the handbell to summon the house staff. Falmug just had a stroke. Lith let her go and disappeared inside the warping mirror. When Xenia started to scream for help, no one came. The house staff thought Falmug was beating her in a particularly vicious manner since she usually never yelled. Like anyone else in the house, Xenia knew that it only made things worse. Oh right, they must think that if they get in here, Falmug will pick on them too. Xenia thought. Help, Falmug doesn't respond. When the servants arrived, they had to help Vilna first. She was still bleeding from her injuries and required a healer, whereas aside from being unconscious, Falmug was fit as a fiddle. The beating had taken less than half an hour, and before returning him to his home, Lith had erased all proof of what had happened with darkness magic and even ironed the man's pants and shirt. Falmug would be unconscious for days before his body and mind could overcome the trauma. Lith had made sure of it. Once he was back to Lucia, Lith kept researching the procedure to heal Xenia until it was time to go back to Camilla's home. When she arrived, Camilla instantly noticed he was once again in a gloomy disposition, but after what had happened yesterday, her heart was at ease. What's the matter, babe? Another failed experiment. She sat on his lap, trying to kiss him, but Lith stopped her. She was shocked. It had never happened before. I wish. It's about Xenia. Her dirtbag of a husband found out about our visit and tried to get even with her. Lith couldn't stand the thought that a man of the caliber of his Earth's father was still breathing, even though he had all the opportunities to kill him. It made his face dark and his voice sour. Oh gods, why didn't you contact me immediately? Is she all right? We need to go. Camilla tried to stand up, but Lith grabbed her hand with a firm but gentle touch. Chapter 609. There's no need. Do you remember the mana crystals I left in the tea room and the promise I made to your sister? Lith asked. Camilla nodded, yet she wasn't reassured by his words. Lith was too serious. He was clearly hiding something from her. I kept my word. I used the array to know when she was in danger and unleash a spell that reflected on Falmug all he did to Xenia. He didn't harm a single hair of hers. That's great news. If everything is fine, then why the long face? She asked. Cammy, what I did is a crime. A blatant abuse of power made it worse by the fact that I left him alive. Now, I'm confessing my crime to you and entrusting you with the knowledge about a secret spell of mine at the same time. Do you understand how serious this is? His words wiped the smile from her face. I understand, she said after a moment of hesitation. You committed a crime to protect my sister, and you're asking me if I can live with it, right? You're asking me if you can entrust your secrets to Camilla the girlfriend without Yeval the handler revealing them out of duty. Lith nodded, putting their relationship to the test for the first time. Just like he did with his academy's mates when he revealed to them his inhuman physical prowess. To him, it was a critical moment. He had not told her all the truth so that if Camilla proved to be unworthy, he would risk nothing. A spell like the one he had described was out of a fairy tale. Even a first-year student would laugh at such a story. Xenia had heard nothing, while Falmug's story would be completely different from Camilla's and even less believable. Not even Minohar could cover the distance from Lucia to Zillida in a matter of seconds. Thank you. Camilla's voice was happy but broken. Small tears streamed down her face. Even though I have plenty of friends, I spent all my life alone because when push comes to shove, my burden was my own. When people heard about my problems, they would pity me and say a lot of nice words, but no one would do anything. Thank you for saving Xenia at all costs. Thank you for taking to heart a problem that's not even yours and putting your career at risk for me. She sobbed, but she never stopped looking in his eyes. Most of all, thank you for trusting me so much. I don't care about my career. I'll do anything to protect your secret just like you did for me. She hugged him, hiding her face on his shoulder, trembling like a puppy scared by a clap of thunder. You're welcome, Lith replied, holding her tight. As I already told you before, being in a relationship means solving together problems that you wouldn't have alone. This means that sooner or later you'll get dragged into the mess that my life is. Are you up for that? He asked. Yes, I am, she said with all her heart. Yet Lith didn't shapeshift nor told her anything else. He just wiped the tears and the snot from her face before giving her a short, soft kiss. Now she's too clouded by her emotions. I have to wait until she is cool-headed again. Only then I will see her true reaction. Lith thought. Words were meaningless to him. Only actions mattered. Tomorrow I'm going to speak with Professor Vaster about your sister, and probably I'll have her admitted at the White Griffin Hospital for the procedure. Do you want to come with me? He held her face between his hands, gently caressing it. I wish I could, but I have to work. I shouldn't even be here. She sniffed. I'll try to be there for the intervention. Please, keep me posted. Lith nodded in reply. Do you want to get out for dinner, or do you want to stay at home? He asked. I want to stay with you, was her reply. She refused to both release him from her embrace or stand up from his legs. Camilla felt like his arms were her castle and his heart was her sky. She wanted that moment to last forever. Are you sure that nothing happened to Xenia? She asked. Absolutely. Not only did the spell protect her, but it also gave me a full checkup of her condition. No harm came to her after our visit. Lith's voice was so confident that it made Camilla's worries disappear. Lith had a hard time preparing dinner while never letting her go, managing to do it solely thanks to spirit magic and fire vision. When he attempted to spoon-feed her, she couldn't repress her chuckle anymore. You're the least romantic man I've ever known. Couldn't this wait a few hours? Maybe you are right, but I'm hungry, and so are you. I can't feel the romance in the air with all this noise. Both of their stomachs had grumbled for a while before Lith started to cook. I know. Stupid stomach. Always ruins everything. It grumbled harder since she had refused the spoon, and the smell of the food was delicious. You're too good a cook. It's all your fault if I get fat. The first bite was enough to make Camilla realize that between her long day at work and all those emotions, she had worked quite an appetite. Hands off my plate, woman. Lith rebuked her merrily as she exploited being on his legs to eat from both plates. Make me, she said while feeding him. The next morning Lith hadn't slept much, again, but he was definitely happy about his past night. Camilla had refused to let him go even during the morning shower, giving to his day a really pleasant start. One thing is for sure. If you two keep up like this, Camilla will lose weight fast. Solus, that's dirty. Lith rebuked her. Hello, Pot. My name is Kettle, and I'm black. She sneered. He left Belius for the White Griffin Academy, where Professor Zogar Vaster and Quilla were waiting for him. Lith, my boy, it's so good to see you again. It would be much better if you didn't visit or call only when you need something, though. I know we are both busy men, but it's kind of rude anyway. That's exactly what I told him, Professor. Quilla nodded. I apologize to both of you. Lith said, having a hard time to repress a sigh of annoyance. I've consulted all the material Quilla sent me, and I'd like to hear your opinion about the different approaches I devised. Hold your horses, Lith. No competent healer would give their opinion based on a hologram, no matter how good it is. We need to see the patient. I've taken the liberty of setting the gate's coordinates to Zillida already. Vasta stood up abruptly. How he managed to do it without wobbling despite his egg-shaped body was still a mystery to Lith. When they reached the Sarda household, the servants quaked in their boots, not daring to say anything. One mage was terrifying, but three at once were the stuff nightmares were made of. Chapter 610. Zinnia, allow me to introduce to you Professor Zogar Vaster and healer Quilla Ernest. He is the leading light in the field of body sculpting and the expert I told you about. Quilla is a genius healer and a dear friend of mine. They are both here to help me with your procedure. Lith said, It is my honor that such an important person bothered himself for a nobody like me, Professor Vaster. Zinnia stood up and gave a deep bow in the direction of Litha's voice. Her head almost touched the floor. It's nothing, my lady. There's no need to thank me, at least not before we've succeeded healing you. Despite his humble words, Vaster puffed out his chest in pride. It had been a long time since a beautiful woman had praised him with such sincerity. Nice to meet you, healer Ernest. Please, take good care of me. Zinnia gave a curtsy, this time following Vaster's voice. The pleasure is all mine. Quilla said. There was something wrong with both the house and its inhabitants, something that gave her the creeps. We need to perform a few diagnostic spells that require physical contact. Do you mind if we touch your head? Vaster asked. Not at all. The moment Vaster cast his best diagnostic spells, Lith could see him turn pale before his usually calm visage was twisted into a red mask of anger. He was clenching his teeth so hard that Lith wouldn't be surprised to hear them crack. Quilla, I need a second opinion, Vaster said while making her way. Lith, I would like to take Lady Sarda to the White Griffin Hospital immediately. We can't perform any procedure until her body doesn't recover and she doesn't put a bit of meat on those bones. His voice was calm, but Vaster had a murderous look in his eyes that could rival with Litha's. I agree with your assessment, Professor. Lady Sarda needs immediate assistance. Unlike Vaster, Quilla's poker face was perfect. So far so good. I healed everything, but left behind everything a competent healer would need to diagnose the repeated domestic abuse over the years. Lith inwardly smiled. In the case of divorce, Vaster's testimony would mean a great deal. Now, I've not prepared any luggage. Zinnia said. There's no need for luggage. The White Griffin will provide you all that you might need. Vaster opened a warp steps leading them back to the city's warp gate, and from there they could reach the hospital ward directly. Once Zinnia was settled in her bed, Lith called Camilla with his civilian communication amulet and left the two sisters talking before meeting the professor again in his study. Camilla's supervisor wasn't very happy about a social call during working hours, but Journey had a family as well, so she let it slide. Scum of the earth, Vaster snarled as Lith entered the room. These are the moments when I regret having left the Queen's Corps. Back then, I would have killed people like Mr. Sarda without a second thought, just adding their name in the collateral damage list. Professor, we're healers, not cold-blooded killers. We took an oath. Quilla rebuked him. It's easy to say when you are so young and naive. When you reach my age, after you'll see things so bad that make that poor woman look lucky in comparison, you'll change your mind. I'm tired of seeing good people die while the bad guys thrive. I agree with Professor Vaster. Lith said. Now, if we can please discuss the treatment, I would love to have your input about how to proceed. I won't sugarcoat this, Lith. It's hard. The optic nerve is part of the central nervous system. One slight mistake can turn her into a vegetable. Even if you succeed in restoring her sight, it's likely that she'll suffer from side effects for the rest of her life. Her other senses might be altered, and her personality might change. If you want my help, you'd better have a good plan. Vaster said. Lith explained to them how he had already managed to temporarily give Zinnia sight using mana as a conduit. I plan on using Camilla, Zinnia's sister, as a blueprint. There may be many differences between them, so my idea is to use mana as a probe, to test where to connect the nerves before actually doing it. This way I can simply slow down the process and use a trial and error approach to avoid affecting her brain in any permanent way. This is genius, Vaster blurted out. Kid, you make me feel useless. How long did it take you to manipulate mana to this extent? It must have taken months just to create a spell so complicated, let alone master it. Lith felt embarrassed. He had devised the spell on the spot, by simply altering his true magic version of Chisel. Back then, Zinnia's desperation had driven him into an outrage. He had done it simply to give her something to fight for. Only later, while he had performed body sculpting simulations, did Lith realize that it could actually be employed as a diagnostic tool to solve most of the unknown factors when harnessing Zinnia's brain. Don't be so harsh on yourself, Professor. I worked on that spell ever since you taught me Chisel, so it's not such a big deal. Also, I can assure you that with your experience in manipulating mana, you would master it in just a few days, if not hours. Litha's words were only a half-truth, as usual. Thanks, but rather than me reinventing the wheel, it would be better if you shared such a spell. The kingdom would reward you handsomely. Vaster said. Sure. Lith shrugged. As soon as I make a fake magic version of it. He thought. The three of them spent the following hours discussing the details of the procedure. Vaster gave Lith plenty of advice, thanks to his rich medical experience. The more Lith explained to him how his probe spell worked, the more Vaster understood what its strong points and limitations were. Quilla took note of everything, using water magic to manipulate the ink and writing faster than a stenographer. She didn't have Vaster's experience, but her ingenuity allowed her to find a solution whenever they got stumped. Zinnia needs plenty of food and rest before undergoing any procedure. Quilla said. I recommend to wait for at least a week. Agreed. Lith and Vaster said in unison. Professor, here is the paper that qualifies me as Lady Sarda's personal healer. If her husband tries anything funny, please alert me immediately. Lith handed him the document so that Vaster could register it into the Academy's archives. I hope he does, dear Lith. This time of the year the magical beasts are particularly voracious. Not to mention how many diseases he could accidentally catch while visiting a dangerous place like our labs. The two men exchanged a murderous look that gave Quilla the creeps. Before leaving the White Griffin, Lith went back to the hospital ward to say Zinnia goodbye and give her a present. Thank you so much, she said while handing Lith back his communication amulet. Too bad Cammy is so swamped with work, we could barely talk. You know, I didn't step outside for years. Even the air is different from how I remember it. I already feel much better. Chapter 111. Well, it is different. The Academy is surrounded by a luscious forest, so the air is bound to be much fresher and fragrant than a city's. I'm sure that Camilla will gladly take you out for a walk, both before and after the procedure. Lith said. If she finds the time, I suppose she could. Zinnia sighed. She had rarely been in a park, let alone a forest. She would give anything just to sniff a few of its flowers. In the meantime, you can talk to her with this. Lith gave Zinnia a communication amulet with only 2 runes, his own and Camilla's. He explained both how to imprint and use it before he left. Lith invited Quilla and Anathor for a double date so that they had the opportunity to meet outside their medical practice. Camilla is a lucky woman. Quilla sighed. First the camellia, then the procedure, and now even a free communication amulet. I wish I had someone who spoiled me like that. You have 2 wonderful parents that do nothing but spoil you. Lith said. I meant as a significant other, my father doesn't count. No offense, Quilla, but what can a boyfriend do that your parents can't? When I was with Floria, finding a present for her was a nightmare. You have to set the bar a little lower, or any sane man will run away in desperation. His words make her half laugh and half worry. Not only were her parents scary, but also being the Urnas one of the most powerful families of the kingdom, there wasn't much that she couldn't acquire with just a snap of her fingers. Quilla walked Lith to the academy's gate, and from there, he went back to Lucia. Lith spent the time before lunch with his parents, returning to the tower only after they consumed the meal together. He had used no mana in the morning, and the time with Quilla and his parents had relaxed his mind, allowing Lith to be at the top of his game. Solus, we are going to take a second attempt at the Orichalcum Skinwalker. If I have enough energy left, I'd like to work on your personal cloaking ring. Lith said. Necro Forge again? Solus asked while preparing everything they needed on the mana forge. Yes. If it fails again, I'll use the remaining 2 chainmail sets to experiment with Bloom Forge. If even lowering the output to 50% doesn't work, I'll have no other choice left. Lith went to the Forge Mastering Lab, taking out the chainmail set, the ingredients, and the blue mana crystals. First, he performed the bonding spell, to give the Orichalcum armor a mana circulatory system capable of harnessing the power of the powerful magic he would imbue it with. Then, he refined the Thunderbird's feather, the Magma Flower's petals, and the Skinwalker's skin into as many pseudo-cores. This time Lith refined them one by one. Since he was forced to use a low energy output, he also had the opportunity to focus on the core's smallest details rather than on raw power. The 4 pseudo-cores were so puny that Lith sighed, considering the experiment worthless already. He merged them with the help of the slime goop, and only then did the real forge mastering begin. Solus used the energy from the mana geyser to empower both the magic circle surrounding the Litha's obsidian forge and the necro hammer. The forge mastering energies made the armor and the merged cores orbit around each other. They kept getting closer until their auras clashed so strongly that they bounced back to their initial position. Lith kept the charged hammer still while he studied the unknown interaction between the Orichalcum and the Thunderbird's feather. Soon the merged cores started to pulse and grow. The Orichalcum's artificial mana flow was drawn by the feather's energy field. Somehow, the feather was able to amplify the incoming mana, using part of it to feed the merged cores before returning the rest to the Orichalcum, making its mana flow also grow stronger. The exchange of energies lasted a while until some kind of symbiotic equilibrium was established. At that point, the merged cores were almost as big as those Lith had prepared during the last experiment. Incredible! No wonder our first attempt was an utter fiasco. Not only did I have to keep the pseudo-cores merged and fix any imperfection that appeared, but also due to the amplification effect on both magical items, I had to fight against an increasingly strong rejection between 5 different kinds of mana. No duh, Sherlock. I told you that 50% was an excellent starting point. Solus gloated. All right, stop. Hammer time, he said, making her laugh so hard that she almost lost her focus. The necro hammer struck the condensed mana circle, channeling Litha's mana and willpower through it, so that when the 2 items collided, they started to merge. Lith rhythmically struck at the circle, releasing each time a blue blast of energy. He would switch between using the accumulated mana to continue the merging process and fixing the deformities that arose due to the clashing forces at work. I'm so glad that I put the lab in the basement. Otherwise, the light this new type of forge mastering produces would be seen for miles. Solus thought. After more than an hour of unrelenting focus that pushed Litha's blue core and mind to their limits, the first prototype of Orichalcum Skinwalker armor was complete. That was intense, Lith said while wheezing. I wouldn't have managed to succeed without your help and the hammer. I wonder if fake mages can use Orichalcum like I just did. Journey's armor wasn't much different from my old one, whereas the Awakened Assassin's was a masterpiece with a lot of powerful enchantments. Oh yeah? I almost forgot. Why didn't you try to add to the new armor full guard as well? Solus asked. She knew how power-hungry Lith was. Because without the cloaking field it would turn me into a neon lamp. That means adding not 1, but 2 new pseudo-cores to the mix plus using an alloy of gold and Orichalcum. Too many variables for someone that had yet to succeed once. Lith imprinted the new armor with his mana and gave it a test run. In its chainmail form it was ugly and uncomfortable to wear. The rough edges of the Orichalcum rings scratched and prickled even his enhanced skin. The moment he stored one of his suits inside the armor's dimensional space, the metal turned into a silvery liquid resembling quicksilver, which spread all over Litha's body until the mimicking process was complete. Its shape shifted faster than the old armor. The fabric of the clothes feels identical to the original as well. Let's test its defensive properties. Lith took an enchanted dagger out of his pocket dimension and handed it to Solus. She struck at Litha's chest, who blocked the dagger with his open palm. Thanks to an invisible energy field enveloping Litha's body, not a single drop of blood was spilled. Solus drew the dagger back and struck again, but this time Lith stood still. When the clothes and the blade collided, neither Lith nor the armor sustained any damage. Chapter 112. It's a success. The old Skinwalker armor would have been pierced, and its barrier wasn't strong enough to protect my exposed limbs from the dagger's enchanted edge. If only both the armor and hammer weren't just a prototype. Lith moaned. He had used cyan mana crystals to make both hammers instead of blue ones, which meant that not only was the Skinwalker ugly to look at, but it also wasn't as powerful as it could have been. Yeah, right. Quit moaning and rejoice. Or at least take a break before working on blood forging another Skinwalker. There's a reason they are called experiments. We don't know if the blue crystal hammer will add new complications. Solus said. Also, I refuse to keep using well-murt hammers as their design. Lith checked at his pocket watch. They still had a lot of time before going back to Belius. He took a quick shower and ate a ham sandwich to recover the lost strength. After half an hour, he was almost back to his peak condition, but used invigoration nonetheless. It's the first time I use Bloom Forge, so everything must be perfect. I can't predict what will happen, but at least by being both mentally and physically at the top of my game, I can rule out tiredness as possible source of mistakes. Lith said. The initial phase of the experiment was identical to Necroforge. Bonding the chainmail to the mana crystal was easy, whereas what followed quickly turned into a nightmare. Lith had to refine the ingredients one by one, creating from each one a small pseudo-core. Condensing so much energy in such a small form required a lot of his focus, but he easily succeeded. The first real problem arose when merging the first two pseudo-cores. The mana pathways weren't strong enough to contain them both, so Lith had to expand the pathways while keeping the cores fused and fighting against the rejection effect. With each core he added, the situation became more complicated. He had to strengthen the mana pathways, fix the deformities that appeared when the armor and the cores collided, plus those which occurred during the pseudo-cores merging process. To merge all 4 cores, it took him over an hour and much more slime goop than he had predicted, since he had to consume some for each new pseudo-core. Then, he was forced to stop, focusing only on stabilizing the mana pathways while the resonance between the orichalcum and the cores made the latter grow. Damn it. If I miss their rhythm by a beat, everything will go down the gutter. To make things worse, I also have to be careful that the cores don't get deformed beyond recognition. Bloom forging a Skinwalker is a mammoth task straight from the beginning. Lith thought. Since they had no need for the hammer yet, Solus was free to help him to give the cores the right shape. Then, the forge mastering turned from a nightmare into a Lovecraft novel. Despair, helplessness, and madness seemed its only possible ending. Growing and fixing 4 pseudo-cores at once, all the while adapting the mana pathways, made Lith almost puke blood. Unlike what had happened when he crafted the Bloom hammer, a small increase in the pseudo-core's size meant a 4-fold increase in the pressure they exerted on the mana pathways. The process was even slower than Lith had predicted, taking a further toll on his mind and mana. On top of that, every time the merged cores grew bigger, the Thunderbird's plume and the orichalcum would interact again. Soon Lith was forced to stop the forge mastering, making it a failure and a success at the same time. A success because the Bloom Skinwalker was complete. A failure because Lith had been forced to halt the process before the pseudo-core could become as big as the one of the Necro Skinwalker. What time is it? Lith asked. Almost late. How do you feel? Terrible. I never used invigoration so many times in a row. It has almost no effect anymore. Lith said. I need some rest as well. Do you mind if I stay in Lucia? The mana geyser will help me recover quickly, and I don't want to be your fifth wheel again. Solus asked. Are you sure? You know that I'm not planning for any lovey-dovey stuff, right? Even if I wanted to, I'm too tired. Lith had got used to being separated from Solus, but he still hated the void that her absence left inside of his soul. Right? Just like yesterday and the day before. Solas's voice oozed sarcasm. I'm a healthy young man in a healthy relationship, and it's been weeks since I spent a bit of time with Camilla. How could I turn her down? You couldn't, and you shouldn't, but that doesn't make it any easier on the fifth wheel. Me. I'll see if I get the girls to come visiting me. Otherwise, I'd rather spend some alone time working on Bloomforge. We have one last chainmail suit. If we fail again, it means that our first estimate is correct and that at our level Bloomforge isn't suitable for crafting so many pseudo-cores at once. Lith reluctantly accepted her decision. Solas was her own person, and just like him, she deserved her own space. When Camilla arrived home, Lith had just finished showering. He looked like someone who had just ended a double shift in a mine. His breath was short and his shoulders slouching from the fatigue. Hello, handsome. How was your day? Camilla pretended not to notice, throwing her arms around his neck. She brimmed with joy. Safe, but tiring. Are you ready to get out for dinner? Won't you prefer to stay at home for some cuddles? You seem a bit tired, she said. That's a nice way of saying that I look like crap. And yes, I would rather stay at home, but I can't afford to lose the reservation. I'll bring you to a family restaurant, so there's no need for fancy clothes. Camilla wore a light blue shirt over a knee-length black pencil skirt. Her long black hair was down. That together with her black eyeliner and light red lipstick emphasized her pale skin. Aren't those the same clothes you wore during our first date? It's not our anniversary yet. Lith asked. I know, but now I consider them my lucky clothes, and I'm feeling pretty lucky recently, she said before giving him a passionate kiss. She was flattered that Lith remembered both the clothes and the date they had met. Camilla was surprised when he brought her to Belius's warp gate. Lith wasn't the type to get too far for a meal. Her surprise became even bigger when the gate led them to a private office in what looked like an ancient castle. Headmaster Marth, this is Camilla, my girlfriend. Camilla, this is Headmaster Marth, a man that I have the honor to call a friend. Duke Marth had more gray hair than the last time Lith had seen him and seemed even more tired than Lith was. Nice to meet you, Miss Camilla. Follow my advice and never get too high in life, or the paperwork will burn your wings and bury you alive. A wave of his hand opened a warp steps that Lith forced her to cross before she could even understand where they were. Chapter 113. Surprise, he said to both Camilla and Zinnia. Zinnia had been accommodated in a single room as big as a small apartment. The furniture was simple but tasteful, giving her all that she needed to make herself at home and even have guests. There were big windows from which entered plenty of sunlight, and lots of different flowers decorated the room. Zin. Between the tonics, Vaster's treatments, and the safe environment, Camilla almost couldn't recognize her sister. Her knees buckled, forcing Lith to sweep her off her feet to prevent her from falling. Cammy, how did you get here? Visiting hours are over. Her knees buckled too, but she was in bed, so no one noticed. Hey, I may not work here anymore, but I still got friends. Visiting hours is whenever you want for you too, Lith said, bringing Camilla near the bed before putting her down on a chair. The two sisters started chatting and crying out of joy while Lith used his old professor ring to order dinner for the three of them. He was feeling better by the minute. His blue core was thriving by being so near to the abundant mana source that the academy was. The two women talked a lot, giving Lith a taste of an evening in Solas's shoes, but to him it didn't feel so bad. He was satisfied with seeing Camilla being so happy. She never stopped smiling, like it hadn't happened ever since her first visit at the Sarda household. If Solas feels like this the whole time, she's a saint, Lith thought. He was already getting bored, not having any part in the conversation. Can I show her your gift now? Zinnia asked, finally remembering about Lith. Yes, of course. Camilla remained flabbergasted seeing the communication amulet. Thanks, but we cannot accept it. It's too expensive, she said. I knew you would say that. And that's why I had her imprinted already, Lith laughed. You can only suck it up and accept that your sister can now call you whenever she wants and vice versa. Camilla was lost for words, incapable of expressing the feelings that were taking her by storm. Thanks, was all she managed to say. She spent the rest of the evening chatting with Zinnia, reminiscing together the happy moments of their shared past and planning the future ones, once the procedure was over. Lith half listened and half slept, making the two women giggle when his snoring reached new heights. Lith is indeed a bit scary, but he's a keeper. Don't let him get away. Zinnia said. I know, but how can I possibly repay him for all of this? We're so different that sometimes it feels like our relationship is one way only, and I'm always on the receiving end. What do I have to offer to him? Your love and trust. Those are two rare commodities, especially for someone who's coveted for their power. Just be honest with him and don't overthink. You are a wonderful person and he knows it. Zinnia took Camilla's hands between hers. Has he ever asked you for something? No, Camilla replied. Then it's you he's interested in, not in what you have. As long as you feel the same, then you've nothing to worry about. Later, when they were returning home, Camilla pondered all the way back on Zinnia's words, even asking Lith for a walk to have more time to think. With winter close to its end, there was no snow covering Belius. The chilly air of the night and the late hour made the city silent. Very few people were still walking around. Camilla looked in the big black buildings that comprised every single city block, thinking for the first time in years if that was the place that she wanted to call home for the rest of her life. Her mind started to wander, reminiscing the party at the Erna's house. It was so big and flashy that it almost scared her. Then, Litha's house in Lucia came to her mind, with the entire family around the fire, with the kids playing together or watching a movie with the rest of the family. That image warmed her heart. When they arrived at her apartment, Camilla felt the need to let Lith know how important he was for her and how deep her affection was. Just like Solus had predicted, tired or not, Lith was more than happy to spend the third night in a row doing anything but sleeping. Earlier that night, inside Solus's tower, thanks to the tower warp coupled with the warping mirror on the first floor, which greatly enhanced the range of her warp steps, it didn't take Solus much time to pick up her friends. I still can't believe how easily we just crossed hundreds of kilometers at once. Lith is really lucky to have you, Tista said. She had been moving around the Distar Marquiate, collecting all the information she needed for her travels once spring finally arrived. Yeah, it makes our sleepovers so easy to arrange. To what do we owe the pleasure this time? Nika asked. Kala's daughter was no normal girl, but a vampire, so she could only move after sunset. Nika looked like a young woman in her mid-20s, around 1.7 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, tall with raven black hair and emerald green eyes, both emphasized by her rosy skin. A vampire was pale only when unable to properly feed, and that wasn't her case. She wasn't a stunning beauty, but undeath gave her smooth, delicate features and kept her body toned without a shred of body fat. Every one of her movements was graceful and sensual, even when she wasn't attempting to flirt. I need help, Solus said. She was wearing a work shirt and pants. Leather gloves covered her hands, leaving the natural glow of her humanoid form radiate only from her head. Do you need another pep talk or advice about Lil Bro? Tista asked. Neither. I mean help with a forge mastering experiment. Solus told her about the last memory she had recovered and what had triggered it. This is huge, sister. Nika was adamant, considering Solus a fellow vampire due to her bond with Litha's life force. Why you didn't tell your spouse? One secret is okay, but two. The more secrets you keep, the more you'll grow apart. For the last time, he isn't my spouse. Lith isn't even my boyfriend. He's with Camilla now. Sometimes Nika's single-minded approach on life exasperated Solus. You share one body, one mind, and one life. If that's not a spouse, what is it? Nika said, always striking the iron no matter if it was hot or not. I'm with Nika, for once. Tista stepped in before the two could start bickering. What if something happens and you two fuse again? If Lith discovers how many things you've kept from him, it will hurt him. I could understand if this was just about not wanting to mess with his relationship, but now it has become about your life. Maybe he could help you recover your memories. Like you always say, just give him a chance. She said. Chapter 114. You are right, and I know it. Solus said. That's the reason I brought you here. Every time we forge master a magical item, I can feel something scratching at the back of my head. Lith is the only one who performs magic, though. I want to forge master something myself, but with a weak-ass core like mine, I can't do it alone. I need your help to keep the mana circle filled with energy, and I'll do the rest. If I'm right, I'll regain another chunk of my memories. If that happens, I'll have no choice but to come clean with Lith. If I'm wrong, nothing will happen and we would have just wasted an hour of our time. Are you with me or not? I'm with you, sister. No matter what. Solus was special for Nika. She was an immortal vampire, just like her, and was also the first friend she had ever had. Let's do this. I always wanted to learn true forge mastery. Tista said. What are we going to make? A cloaking ring. Without it, Lith and I can't ever go separate ways without risking that someone spots my life force. If that happens, our lives would be in constant danger. To make one, I need only basic ingredients. An alloy of gold and silver would suffice, but I'll go with orichalcum instead of silver to achieve a stronger pseudo-core than Orion's. It's a very simple pseudo-core, so even with a deep green mana core like mine, I should be able to make it. Even if I fail, it's no big deal. The materials for one ring are negligible, except for the mana crystal. Solus whispered that last part, but everyone heard it distinctly. Tista knew how stingy her brother was, and she doubted he would miss the disappearance. As for Nika, she couldn't care less. Her mother provided her for everything, so she had no concept of expensive or cheap. Solus took the Bloom hammer out of her pocket dimension. Both hammers had the same properties, but since she was going to use Bloom Forge for the ring, it seemed the proper choice to her. Solus melted in a crucible a nugget of gold together with one of purified orichalcum, and then she poured the liquid into a mold, giving the ring its shape. She cooled it with water magic, taking the still white hot metal with thongs, and placing it on the adamant forge instead of the usual obsidian one. In all of my memories I work with a silvery hammer, using a silvery forge to enchant something. My guess is that it was all made of adamant, but since I don't have any, orichalcum will have to do. Solus thought. Another thing that bothered her was the runes of power engraved on all the enchanted items that appeared in her memories. Fake Forge Mastery used them to create and stabilize the mana pathways, but they would disappear forever once the process was over. The true Forge Mastery Lith and Solus employed didn't use runes at all, only pure mana. She was certain that Master Menadion wouldn't have all of her creations engraved with runes just to make them look cool. The problem was that even if Solus was right and runes could help to step up their creations, she had no idea what they did nor how to engrave it. Carving random runes is bound to make a big boom. Let's hope to regain some memories of them. It would be a wonderful anniversary present for Lith. Soon would it be the anniversary of Solus's awakening from her slumber. Lith considered it like her birthday, but for Solus its significance went beyond that. It was the day when she had gained her family, her best friend, and maybe even more. It was the day when their bond had evolved from the pact between an artifact and its master into a partnership. She wanted both the secret of the runes and the ring to be her fist gift to Lith, to return something after only having taken from him for so long. Also, it would give her the courage she needed to reveal him her humanoid form. Unlike Orion, she had no purple crystal. Solus could only bond the ring with a small blue mana stone. Then, she created the magic circle and let the girls fill it. Solus had to take care of both the hammer and the pseudo-core. There was a limit to what her focus could do on her own. Gold proved to be incredibly resistant to mana, both during the bonding spell and the forge mastering process. Solus had chosen to use Bloom Forge because she lacked the raw power necessary to overcome the combined rejection effect of the gold and the mana circulatory system. Finesse was her only route to success, and Bloom Forge was the perfect means to her end. First, she created a small pseudo-core and mana pathways, only using the hammer to increase their size once she was certain that she had shaped them to perfection. Each strike produced a deep green burst of light, yet no memory emerged. This is odd. In my memories, I was striking directly at the item, not at the magic circle. What significance could it possibly have? Solus thought. It took the girls almost 2 hours to complete the ring, and by the time they were done, they were completely exhausted. You and my brother are 2 peas in a pod, Solus. If this is your concept of fun, remind me to take a rain check the next time you invite me. Tista was covered in sweat, her body aching like it was going to break. To keep the circle powered up, she had been forced to use invigoration non-stop. I'm starving, Nika said while trying to not look at Tista like she was a giant cheeseburger. She had no sweat, but no invigoration either. To do her part, she had gone dangerously close to a feeding frenzy. I'm sorry, girls. I never realized how hard it is to do what I do with the mana geyser. Solus gave Nika a jug filled with Litha's blood that she kept in her pocket dimension for her undead friend. Nika smelled the delicacy, drinking it in small sips, using the refined meditation technique in between gulps. Vampires would get stronger over time by feeding. The stronger the source of blood, the more nutrients they would obtain. Normal vampires would just drink blood that would be partially processed by their blood core, making it slowly grow in power each time they fed. Even though they were not awakened once, some vampires had discovered a technique to refine all the blood they ingested instead of just a small part. They had shared their knowledge with Kala, and she in turn had passed it on to his daughter. Thanks to Refine, Nika was able to assimilate most of the mana and light energy inside Litha's blood, allowing her core to grow at a faster rate than normal. Unlike mana cores, the power of a blood core was determined by how much black energy they still held. The more powerful a blood core was, the less black streaks it had. According to legends, a perfectly red blood core granted a vampire the ability to turn back into a red-cored human at will, overcoming all the limitations of their undead status at the price of all their magic powers as long as they maintained such form. Chapter 115. Since you have no troubles with other women sleeping with your spouse, can I borrow him from time to time? He's beyond delicious, and Mom has taught me how I can feed on a man while we both experience the same amount of pleasure. Nika asked. Blood was the most abundant source of life force, but it was not the only one a vampire could draw sustenance from. He is not my spouse, and like heck I'm fine with it. Solus blurted out. I'm jealous, okay? I admit it. Are you happy now? Actually, yes. Nika said, while giving the flabbergasted Solus a big hug. I would never touch your man. I just wanted you to express your feelings out loud. Nika was usually tactless and so direct when she wanted something that she bordered on being rude. Solus had completely fallen for her act, and so did Tista, who had become beet red at the image the Nika's words had painted in her head. What about your memory? Tista asked, eager to change the topic. I did everything I could like it happens in my visions, but nothing. The cloaking ring is a masterpiece, but the attempt to retrieve my memories was a failure. It seems I can afford to keep my secret for a bit longer before. Solus choked on her words as she noticed that Tista was deadly pale. The prolonged effort had triggered the body refinement process. Tista was soon in spasms as her body expelled the accumulated impurities by turning her inside out like a sock. Tista's bones cracked and reformed, causing her such an intense pain that Solus had to use her immortal body array to ensure her survival. Worst girl's night ever. Tista said once the process was over, right before losing consciousness. In the days before the procedure, Camilla used all of her free time to stay with her sister, while Lith alternated between experimenting on forge mastering and on origin flames. Even his second attempt at crafting a Bloom Skinwalker armor ended up in failure. Its pseudo-core was too complex and the amount of mana it required too big for Lith's current abilities, even with Solus's help. In the meantime, Zekel had finished smelting the first 2 batches of orichalcum into metal ingots. He was working on a way to make shos, hauberks, and coifs with a decent shape since Lith had yet to send him the blueprint for the hammers. After thinking about it for a while, Lith gave him 2 different images for 2 different hammers. One was shaped like a proper blacksmith tool, consisting of a shaft and a head with 2 hammers. The second was more similar to an ice axe, featuring on its head a hammer and a small pick. Why 2 hammers? No matter the forge mastering technique we use, they'll have the exact same properties. It's a waste of orichalcum and mana crystals. Solus couldn't understand Litha's decision. For someone as stingy as he was, such a thing was like throwing money in the gutter. I have my reasons, was the only reply he would give her. Lith and Solus forge mastered both hammers, and then practiced with the amount of extra mana the forge mastering tools could hold before attempting to craft a Skinwalker armor again. Also, they learned a few new things about origin flames. Even though there was a huge difference between how they interacted with physical materials and magical energy, they could burn them both. Things like stone or metal would seemingly be destroyed and reformed several times. It would cause them to change their shape and physical properties. Both the quality and the quantity of origin flames employed influenced the outcome. A little amount would act almost as if it was a common flame. Too much would destroy anything. During our first attempt, we didn't really purify the adamant. More like we incinerated everything else. Adamant is incredibly resistant, even to origin flames. It's the only reason it survived the blast, Lith pondered. Magic, instead, would be simply consumed by the flames, but the process had a limit. Origin flames could only destroy an amount of mana equivalent to the world energy they held. It meant that a delicate structure like an ongoing spell or a temporary array could be easily affected, whereas a permanent array or a magical artifact required much more effort. Lith tried using them on some of his oldest works, who had now become too weak to be useful, to put to the test his theory about origin flames being capable of breaking the imprint of the owner on a magical item. He obtained conflicting results. The flames would eat at the magical aura, forcing the item's pseudo-core to consume its energy to survive. After a certain point, however, the pseudo-core would rather break than bend. Lith even tried using the Clean Slate spell on a weakened pseudo-core, but the only result was making the item crumble. So far, origin flames act more like some kind of antimatter for magic rather than a fine controlled tool. They can attack the structure of a spell, but not its energy signature. Lith said while one of his old daggers turned into a puff of smoke. I'm not so sure of it. Maybe the problem lies in your hybrid form. Solus said. After all, if we compare it with the complete one you assumed in the past, you still have a long way to go. Another possibility is that just like true magic, they might be affected by your will. I don't use mana to create her, only a tiny spark of life force. Lith objected. I have no idea how to imbue my will inside my own life force. Even if I did, how the heck can I command it to burn something and ignore the rest? Solus had no answers as well, so their days passed quickly. Between family, friends, and experiments, Lith resumed sleeping only when strictly necessary, like the day before Zinya's procedure. Camilla had managed to obtain a sick leave for medical reasons. She was Zinya's closest of kin, making her optic nerve the closest thing to a compatible blueprint. Without her, Lith couldn't operate. After a whole week of proper feeding, safety, and constant care, Zinya had flourished to the point of being almost unrecognizable. Yet that day she was pale again, twitching at the smallest noise. How do you feel today? Lith asked. Scared to death. Both sisters replied. Are you sure you want to proceed with the treatment? It was an obligatory question before a body sculpting procedure. Zinya held Camilla's hand tightly before replying. Yes, please. I can't wait for this to be over. Unlike normal magical treatments, for Tier 5 healing spells, the patient's head and limbs had to be strapped to their bed. Is this really necessary? Zinya asked. Yes. It could be painful, or it could affect your personality. You might even become violent. If that happens while I'm growing the optic nerve inside your head, and you move abruptly, it could result in a fatal hemorrhage. Lith replied. Now I really wish I didn't ask you any explanation. She was now even more nervous. Lith, Quilla, and Vaster all double cast their scanner spell on both sisters to check their conditions. Lith and Vaster also activated the chisel spell. Lith needed it to perform the procedure, whereas Vaster would keep it at the ready in case his intervention was required. Chapter 616. The first part of the operation required to make space for the new nervous tissue without harming the patient. Lith had no experience in the field, and the brain was too sensitive an organ for a rookie. Vaster took the lead, removing what he could and using body sculpting to slightly alter Zinya's skull to create more room whenever he had no other choice. The changes were so subtle that only a detailed diagnostic spell like Scanner could detect them. When he was done, he stepped out and made space for Lith. Remember, the best approach is always to go from easy to hard. Start by creating the optic nerve from the eye end and leave the connection with the thalamus for last. That way, we can immediately check if the brain receives the right stimuli. If we work the other way around and make even just a few mistakes, the sudden massive flow of wrong inputs might cause permanent damage. Plus, we would need to destroy all the connections and redo everything from scratch, since we would have no idea what went wrong. Vaster said. Lith did as instructed and created the optic nerve, the chiasma, and the optic trait. Then, he used his probe spell to create small tendrils of semi-solid mana that stimulated Zinya's visual cortex following Camilla's optic nerve pattern. The tendrils would carry the electrical impulses that light generated by hitting Zinya's eyes and allow Lith to check how the brain processed the acquired information. That way Lith could make sure that the impulses would travel through the right pathway before making a physical connection. Zinya, I need you to keep talking during the entire procedure. I don't care what you say, I just need to check your cognitive functions and your mood. If you feel anything weird, just tell me. Don't hold anything. Lith said. Xenia nodded and started to recount whatever she remembered from her youth. As long as everything was okay after testing with probe, Lith would grow the optic nerve, yet more than once he was forced to stop and backtrack. Sometimes the electrical impulses would cause her small spasms. Other times fits of pain or uncontrollable mood changes. Every time that happened, Lith had to quickly disconnect the tendrils and search for another point of access to her brain. Luckily, the more the procedure progressed on the right track, the more Xenia regained her sight. It gave Lith a clear indicator of his progress and gave Xenia something useful to talk about. At the beginning, she could only see a white light, but every time Lith found a proper pathway, she would start to see small dots of colors appear. Damn it, Lith. Your probe spell is amazing. It saved us a lot of mana and the patient a lot of pain. Vaster said. Even with his expertise, he would have missed the right connection more than once. Yet his help proved to be invaluable for Lith whenever he had no idea how to proceed. It would take the professor just a couple of tries to find the right pathway among hundreds of seemingly identical alternatives. You are doing great, son. I'm really proud of you. Lith nodded, not having the luxury of wasting his focus to reply. What Vaster had no idea of was that to be able to carry a physical stimulus, probe required a great expenditure of mana. It was one of the reasons Lith couldn't hold it for long back, when he had used probe for the first time on Xenia. Such a huge amount of energy would have burned her brain and left him weakened in a matter of minutes. Now, however, he was only creating the extremities of the optical nerve with probe, lessening the burden on both Xenia and himself. The procedure took a few hours, forcing Lith to take some rest. Vaster or Quilla stepped in to check on the progress, keeping the patient's condition stable while Lith consumed a tonic and used invigoration to regain his mental focus. Mana wasn't an issue, but he could feel his concentration declining. For a normal healer, it would have taken several minutes for a tonic to give them back their focus, but invigoration had no such problem. By the time everything was over, Xenia could see better than most. Is it over? She asked when she felt the straps being removed. Yes. Can you touch my hand? Lith offered her his right hand, keeping it low and on the right. Xenia had no problem with depth nor distance perception. She managed to grab Lith's hand easily no matter where he placed it within her field of view. Thank you so much. I know it isn't worth much coming from a blind person, but you all are the most gorgeous people I have ever met. Xenia embraced and kissed the entire medical staff and the nurses that had taken care of her until that day. Camilla and Xenia hugged in joy while Lith and Vaster planned together her physiotherapy. Xenia still needed to learn how to move normally, read, write, and even to associate a name to common objects. One more thing. Vaster cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. We can keep Xenia here for a couple more days to make sure that there are no post-op complications, but then she has to leave. We need the room for the next patient. How much do I owe you? Camilla asked. I'm sorry your sister isn't part of your family register. Otherwise the army would cover part of the expenses. Vaster handed her the invoice. Camilla owed the White Griffin much less than she had feared. 2 gold coins for Vaster's consultation and body sculpting, 30 silver coins for Quilla's research job, and 70 silver coins for Xenia's stay at the White Griffin, for a total of 3 gold coins. It was still a huge amount of money considering that Camilla was paid 2 silvers per week. Body sculpting was the most difficult technique, after all. Most people would more easily afford a magical item to compensate for their handicap rather than having it treated. That's it. I expected at least 10 gold coins. It was how much the cheapest and less competent healer would have asked, the same price of 2 communication amulets. Camilla wouldn't have been able to afford her own if the army hadn't gifted it to her when she had been promoted to first lieutenant. You would be right if the lead healer had charged you with something, but he didn't. Vaster pointed at Lith. He knew how Camilla hated to feel indebted, so he didn't ask for favors to Vaster nor the academy. Otherwise, the whole procedure would have been free of charge. I respect Camilla's desire to save her sister, and I can't take it away from her. If I stepped in and solved everything by myself, she would feel useless. All of her struggles and fears would be for nothing. This way, she can still feel like she has done her part because she did. Even without me, Xenia would still have got her sight. It would have just been more expensive. Lith thought. How much do I owe you? Camilla turned to Lith, repeating her question. I'll cut the workmanship and charge you only at cost price. So, it's 50 silver coins for the amulet and dinner for the procedure. Chapter 6:17. What? Camilla was flabbergasted. The mana crystal is small but powerful, and I bought the silver ingot at market price. The healing only took me some mana, so dinner will suffice. Lith explained. It's too little money. I can't accept that, she said. Sorry, miss. Healers make their own fares. Vaster and Quilla nodded at those words. Besides, you should worry more about Zinya's accommodation. Your apartment is good for 2 people, but cramped for 3. Also, we're both often away for work, and your sister needs guidance. Lith said. Camilla bit her lower lip in stress. Zinya could indeed move into her home, but there was only 1 bedroom, so either she had to take a break from their relationship or they would be forced to go to a hotel every time. Changing the apartment wasn't possible. With a debt on her shoulders, Camilla couldn't afford a new one with just her savings. The one she lived in was provided by the army for a reduced fee, but they wouldn't help her pay for a bigger house since she was officially single and without any family member. To make matters worse, Belius was a horrible city for someone as inexperienced as Zinya was. Public transportation required to be able to read. There was almost no green area, and people were paranoid of newcomers. To not leave Zinya alone all day, Camilla would need to hire a caregiver to keep her company and teach her everything she might need. Don't worry, Cammy. You've already done too much. I can't let you give up on your life for my sake. I'm still Falmug's wife. I have a home and duties to attend to. Maybe now that I'm not blind anymore, he might change his ways. He hasn't always been a bad man. Zinya's smile trembled just as her whole body did. Despite all of her efforts, she was terrified at the idea of seeing her husband or even hearing his voice again. No way. It's too dangerous. Camilla, Lith, and Vaster said at once. Lady Sarda, according to my experience, things can only get worse now that you aren't helpless anymore. Vaster said. On top of that, in your condition, a single blow to the head could ruin everything we did today. Your body needs time to heal and adapt. I have an idea. Lith said. Zinya could stay in Lusha with my parents until the end of my leave. They have plenty of free space and could use a hand with the kids. I can warp you there whenever you want, and when I have to go back to work, she can move into your apartment. Camilla couldn't decide what to do. Lusha was much better than Belius for her sister's recovery, but she felt like she was once again relying too much on Lith. Zinya has only experienced an abusive relationship. Maybe seeing how the marriage of my parents and sister work could help her to make up her mind about the divorce. Lith whispered in her ear. Lusha, it's a perfect solution. She sighed. Her pride was a bit wounded, but Zinya's well-being came first. Falmug had just recently started to walk again after being unconscious for several days. Lith had been true to his word. Ever since Falmug had woken up, Lith would kidnap him, blind him, and beat the crap out of him until his body collapsed. Falmug Sarda had been living in terror the whole time. There was no place he could hide where the demon wouldn't be able to find him. He used the unexpected respite Zinya's intervention had given him to run to the authorities and expose the evil mage. The desk clerk of the Mage Association listened to all he had to say before dismissing everything for the ramblings of a madman. I'm sorry, Sir Sarda, but your story is really hard to believe. If you did make an enemy of the strongest young mage of the kingdom, how can you possibly be still alive? Also, you failed to mention why he would have a beef with you. Even the clerk of a medium-sized city like Zillida was sick and tired of all the lunatics blaming Ranger Verhen for everything. Pregnant girls claimed he was the father and demanded compensation. Nutjobs said to have been cursed by him or that he had taken credit for their achievements, like restoring Kaduria. Falmug realized to be in a pinch. He had been so anxious to get rid of his torturer to forget about making up a believable lie. He thought far and wide how to explain why someone like Lith was tormenting him, but unless Falmug confessed the abuse on his wife, his story wouldn't make any sense. Yet if he did, Lith would become the last of his problems. Despite his constant pain and suffering, Falmug was still a respectable man with consistent income. If the truth about his home were to be exposed, he would go to jail, and Zinya would be entitled to everything just by asking for a divorce. He is after my wife. His words made the clerk chuckle. Sorry, sir. I don't mean to disrespect you, but if I ask your wife, will she confirm your story? Of course not. She's on his side. Enough wasting my time. The clerk had run out of patience. If your wife wanted to be with him, she would just ask for a divorce. A great mage has plenty of money. She wouldn't need anything from you. What proof do you have of your claims? Falmug was taken aback. Now he understood what Lith meant when he said that he would turn Falmug into his wife. He was now alone and with no one who could help him. There was no witness of the aggressions nor proof of his injuries aside from his words. Just like his wife until a few days ago, he was trapped in an inescapable cage. None? Well, then I hope you'll forgive me if I don't believe a word coming from a man accused by 3 healers of repeatedly beating his wife. As the clerk was filing Falmug's statement for the record, his name had triggered a flag. Not to mention that according to the army records, at the time of the alleged assaults, Ranger Verhen was still at his home. I don't know what your problem is, sir, but maybe a night in jail will help you clear your mind. What about Verhen? Falmug asked while the guards dragged him towards the dungeon. None of your business. In your place, I'd worry more about being charged with slander of a state mage and wasting the association time, because those are 2 crimes I can testify about. Litha's parents knew all about Zinya's situation, so they were glad to offer their help. In their eyes, she was the embodiment of what could have happened to Tista if Lith had never been born. Zinya fell in love with Lusha, with the Tron Woods, and with the closest thing to a real family she had ever had. Learning how to read, write, and count together with Lyria and Aaron was embarrassing, but after a while she stopped worrying about it. Alina also taught her how to cook and sew, so that once she moved back with Camilla, she could at least help her managing her home. The days passed, and soon Litha's leave was about to end. Chapter 618. A few days before Lith had to once again leave to resume his duty as Ranger of the Keller region, Zinya finally mustered enough courage to tell Camilla about her final decision. Cammy, I could never thank you and Lith enough for what you did for me. The last week has been the happiest time of my life. She said, This is just the beginning, Zin. There are still so many things that we have yet to do together. I'll not be often home, but I'll try my best to not make you feel lonely. I've already found a caregiver for you. Camilla replied with a smile. The daily expenses for the caregiver and Zinya would make it even harder for her to repay her debt, but she didn't mind at all. Camilla had planned everything and was ready to bear the consequences of her decision. Thank you, but I'd like to remain here. Zinya blurted it out. What? You have your personal life and your career to worry about, Cammy. I'm not a child, and you can't take care of me forever. I'd rather live here as a housemaid than burden you more than I already did. I already spoke with Alina about it. The Verhen are nice people. They accepted to give me food and accommodation in exchange for my job, while they teach me everything I need to stand up for myself. They are even willing to pay me once I'm done learning. I've also decided to file for divorce. If I stay at your house, Falmug might look for me there. He will never come looking for me here. Instead, I don't know if I have the strength to face him yet. So this is the perfect solution. Camilla tried to convince Zinya to reconsider, but she was adamant about it. Camilla was sad at the idea that meeting her sister without Litha's help would take her quite some time. The closest gate was in Dirios, and to reach Lusha from there it would take her over 1.5 hours. Yet seeing her so happy and determined filled her heart with joy. I did all I could to give Zin her freedom. If I force her to come with me, she would just exchange one cage for another. Here she'll be surrounded by people who don't take care of her because it's their job, but because they want to. Also, she will be safe from Falmug, since attacking a mage's family is plain suicide. She thought. Zinya and I have tried visiting her children, but Zinya's in-law didn't even let us in. According to the law, she is just a disabled, incompetent mother who has run away from her home. To be able to claim any right over her children, she first needs to get a divorce and have the means to take care of them. I don't want to burden Lith with this matter as well. Camilla thought while preparing to say her goodbyes. I'm really sorry, I knew nothing about this. It wasn't an elaborate scheme I devised from the very beginning to keep you and your home all to myself. Lith said as a joke, yet for a second Camilla almost fell for it. When will you be back? She asked. I don't know. It could take weeks, maybe months. The silver lining is that now that you have exchanged your communication rune with Tista, she can help you reach Lusha whenever she is at home. Lith said, That's not what I asked you, you silly. I miss you already. She hugged him tightly. During those 20 days they had lived together, and the idea of waking up alone hurt her more than she expected. Will you wait for me? He asked, returning her embrace. I promise. Lith took her back home, where they kissed one last time before he had to resume his duty. Ever since Scarlet the Scorpicore had visited Li Gain, asking for his help to solve the issue of her inability to obtain a purple core and achieve new tribulations, she had remained within the Gorgon Empire. Hundreds of years had passed since the last time she had left the Griffin Kingdom, back when she was still a young Emperor Beast. Taking the mantle of the Lord of the Forest had given her great powers, but also a great burden. Traveling allows me to learn about different magical philosophies, understand what the heck Mogre wants from me with its stupid tribulations, and to check about abominations. Many birds with one stone, she said out loud, drawing attention on herself. Damn it, I'm not used to be disguised as a human. I keep making stupid mistakes that force me to move from a town to another as if I'm a wanted criminal. I keep forgetting that fake mages need to chant gibberish to use magic, and that they can't break stone with their bare hands. She thought while calling a waiter to get seconds. Another thing she had a hard time with was the small portions of food humans consumed. Even if her appearance was that of a woman, her body was still that of a Scorpicore, and so was her stomach. She looked like an adventurer in her 30s, about 1.67 meters, 5 feet 7 inches, tall. Her shoulder-length ashen gold hair had red shades, and she wore a gold-rimmed pince nez on her nose. The body Scarlet had shape-shifted into was pretty, but not gorgeous. She preferred to go unnoticed in human settlements rather than being forced to constantly deal with flocks of admirers. Centuries ago, when she had taken a walk with Solark, they had been forced to knock down the entire male population of a village just to be able to order a beer without someone hitting on them. She was currently in the city of Tyranar to investigate the rumors about a mysterious monster that was slaughtering men and beasts alike for no apparent reason. If I'm right, I might have found one of those new eldritch abominations. Right after the monster outbreaks ended, the council reported the appearance of several creatures of unparalleled power. According to my sources, they should still be within my league. If I managed to track one of them and defeat it, I could finally learn something more about this master. I could even find out his location. Scarlet thought as she took her communication amulet out of her pocket dimension for the first time in almost a year. Oh crap, she blurted out, this time intentionally. She had so many missed calls that it took her quite some time just to take note of who she wanted to call back and who she would just ignore. Call me if you need anything else. The young waiter gave Scarlet a kind smile that she returned while wondering why the heck a Trentling was working in a restaurant. Trentlings were trees that, after living for centuries in a zone rich with world energy, had become awakened. They were the plant equivalent of a magical beast. His disguise was flawless, but Scarlet's enchanted pince nez allowed her to not only see the mana core of her opponents, but also their life force. The eyes of Menadion were one of her most prized artifacts, which had allowed her to increase her knowledge about light magic by leaps and bounds ever since she had liberated it from the paws of a mad griffin. Just like for any living creature, being born from a good-natured parent didn't guarantee that they would inherit their heart or wisdom. Some of Li Gain's children were so infamous that the council had put a bounty on their head, even though they weren't even awakened. Chapter 619. The same had happened for the offspring of Solark and Tyrus. Since the Guardian's children were born capable of using all kinds of true magic and were gifted with a life that could span for almost a millennium, the council considered them to be a threat of the highest level. Well, the silver lining is that plants are the chattiest among living beings. The disguised Trentling might be able to point me in the right direction. Scarlet thought. She handed several copper coins to pay for her meal to the waiter, enough to feed a small platoon, and almost as many as a tip. I'm flattered by your attentions, miss, but I'm strictly a waiter. You're not even my type, sorry. The young man said, yet he still pocketed all the money. Neither you're mine, smart ass of a Trentling. Scarlet's voice was a low growl, her teeth shape-shifting for a second into fangs. She wanted to make sure the greenhorn would get her point. You're lucky I'm a carnivore. Otherwise, I would be glad to make a salad out of you as a token of my appreciation. How do you know who I am? The waiter looked around, worried that someone might have noticed their exchange. You can call me Scarlet, Little Salad. Now if we are done playing, I'd like you to tell me everything you know about the creature that plagues this land. Scarlet said, I'm sorry, but I only know what everyone does. A few months ago, Right after the monster outbreak, a creature started to raid the Galuan forest. At first, it only attacked the magical beasts, so we didn't care. Then it killed even the lord of the forest, and after that, everything went downhill. There's nothing alive there anymore. Most wildlife and flora have been wiped out. The Trentling sighed. The lord of the forest is dead? Are you saying that thing killed Misher the unicorn too? How is it possible? She was young but quite powerful. Why do you think I'm here? Every sane creature is running away from death. I've no idea what it is because no one who has seen it has survived the encounter. Allow me to give you a fair warning in exchange for the generous tip. Now that the Galuan forest is nothing but an empty shell, the monster has started to attack nearby human settlements. It's only a matter of time before it arrives here too, so don't make yourself too comfortable. The waiter went back to serving the tavern clients, keeping an ear out for rumors about the monster. The idea of an emperor beast dying so easily at the hands of an unknown creature made the ancient Scorpicore worry. She returned to her hotel room and called Ligain, hoping that the guardian of the Gorgon Empire could help her. Even though he had almost relinquished those lands, they were still his turf. What it is now? I'm kind of busy. Ligain sounded annoyed, but him responding immediately eased Scarlet's fears. Why has no one taken care of the Galuan forest yet? She asked. The Empire takes 1/3 of the Garland continent. It's not something as puny as your old forest was. I'm hunting down one of those insanely strong eldritch abominations, so I've no time to waste. Milea is busy dealing with a lich who got bored with his research and wants to conquer her lands. She can't leave until she has destroyed him, but she has dispatched her troops all ready to take care of your problem. Unfortunately, the Galuan forest is in the middle of nowhere. Do you have any idea how many crises Milea has to face on a daily basis? Cut her some slack. Over and out. Ligain is having trouble tracking an eldritch? Either it's a master at hiding their presence, or the situation is even worse than I thought. I need to achieve a frigging purple core, or soon my power will not be enough to survive against the new breeds of abominations. Solving the Galuan forest's problem might trigger the breakthrough I've been looking up until now. To further evolve, I need a real challenge. Plus, if I do him a favor, Ligain will owe me. I can't pass on the opportunity to ask him for a reward. Scarlet thought. A wide grin appeared on her face. At her level and age, the real challenge to further her magical research was the lack of very powerful and rare ingredients. Adamant and Davros were the only metals she looked for, and Guardians usually had quite a stockpile of them. Even if the threat turned out to be a minor one, she could always ask Ligain for a bit of his blood or one of his scales. The power of such powerful ingredients would allow her to finally upgrade her equipment. Scarlet left the hotel and spread her membranous wings. Air magic filled them with wind, boosting her flight speed to subsonic levels. She had been to the Galuan forest in the past, but her memory of the place was foggy. She didn't remember enough to perform consecutive warps, and even if she did, the place was quite far. Dimensional magic would make her travel shorter, yet at the same time, it would drain a lot of her mana, forcing Scarlet to use Invigoration more than once. If this monster is so strong, I need all of my trump cards to beat it. I can't risk being defeated just because I'm too tired to put out a decent fight, she thought. Flying would take longer, but it would consume an insignificant amount of her energy. Only humans with their short lifespan would warp even to go to the bathroom. Half an hour later, Scarlet had almost reached her destination. A small caravan moving from Galuan drew her attention. It was composed of humans, plants, and beasts. The caravan was too an odd mix to be normal. Despite it was still at several kilometers of distance from her, Scarlet could distinguish them clearly, as if she was standing right beside them thanks to the eyes of Minadion. With just a flap of her wings, she reached their position and gracefully landed on the ground. The group was as heterogeneous as it was powerful. There were dryads, thorns, who were creatures born from the awakening of bushes, whereas dryads were born from flowers, and trentlings from trees, magical beasts of various species, and several human mages. The weakest mana core among them was Cyan, yet they were all on edge and armed to the teeth. As soon as they noticed Scarlet, they assumed a defensive formation. What the heck is going on here? Scarlet retracted her wings, uncaring of their threat. They were too weak and their equipment was poor. She was quite surprised noticing that the humans weren't impressed seeing a winged woman. Don't worry, She's one of us, said a big Ree, a wolf-type magical beast, after sniffing the air for a second. A magical beast giving away so easily their ability to talk was also a bad sign. How can you be so sure this isn't just another trick? I lost my wife by trusting a stranger, said a burly wizard who was holding a metal staff brimming with mana. Just as I lost my pack. Stop whining and keep moving, human. The Ree growled and resumed his advance. Chapter 620. The magical beast started moving at a speed the humans could follow while keeping their spells at the ready. Scarlet could feel that each one of them was grieving and was filled with hatred. Yet there was no bickering nor disrespect between the different races. It was enough to give her the creeps. We can't afford to stop. If you want answers, you'd better follow us. The Ree said, we are all that's left of the entire Galuan forest. The others have either already escaped or died. To answer your earlier question, Mogr has turned against its children and none can escape its fury. His words made Scarlet sneer. Very dramatic. I never heard of a Ree with so much talent with words. Do you mind being a bit more specific? It's hard to explain. One day the natural order was simply turned upside down. You could see a plant eat a deer, the deer hunt a wolf, and the wolf attack his own pack. Humans too were affected by the phenomenon, but them attacking their own or killing for sport is hardly a novelty. No offense. The Ree said. None taken, replied a middle-aged magician who was sitting on top of a Sinji, a boar-type magical beast, to be able to cast the life-sensing array from time to time. It had allowed them to identify the enemy hidden among the grass and escape from several ambushes. Whatever it is, it's capable of taking any form it wants. A flower, a Ree, a human, anything. Even its smell is almost identical to the original. I had to almost die twice to learn how to distinguish the anomaly it holds. What anomaly? That word reminded Scarlet of Lith, making her fear that her decision to spare him all those years ago had finally backfired. It's a hybrid smell, part beast, part abomination, part undead. With each word the Ree spoke, Scarlet's stomach churned stronger, at least until she heard the last part. Undead? Don't you mean human? She asked. No, I'm sure of it. For once humans are innocent. The Ree shook his head. Ambush. The warden yelled 1 second before black sprouts emerged from the ground. They grew at an unbelievable speed, draining all life from their surroundings to sustain their existence and turning the grasslands into barren earth. Like the group they were chasing, the creatures mimicked the appearance of members of different races. Their age and gender appeared to be random. There were even children and elderly among them. The creatures were a pulsing mass made out of bones, of the chaos energy typical of abominations, and of black vines instead of flesh. The red light of undeath burning inside their eyes revealed a desperate hunger. Yet as fast as they had appeared, their forms became indistinguishable from the living. Vines turned into flesh, and the red light was replaced by normal pupils as their skin or fur turned from pitch black to what it was supposed to be. Why did you abandon us, Mom? We miss you. We promise to behave if you return, said 2 little kids to the warden. They had big watery eyes, like those of a child too naive to understand what they have done to anger their beloved parents. You're not my real children. I've seen you die. Rage and grief boosted the power of her darkness magic spells. 2 black bolts erupted from her hands, turning the 2 kids into rotten mush among high-pitched screams of agony. Don't run away, my love, said a female Ree to the leader of the group. I'm not dead, and I mean you no harm. I just want to be reunited with you. If you pledge your alliance to the Great Mother, we could both happily live forever. The male Ree hesitated. He had fought many of those creatures, but never before one of them had taken the semblance of his beloved Nia. Nice try, scum. Scarlet raised her pants nez above her head, making it emit a pulse of light that brushed off the illusion and revealed the cruel reality underneath. No matter their gender, age, or race, all the creatures had a single life force, a single smell, and were made of mud. The vines that covered their bodies allowed them to move, while the chaos energy covering them replaced their true semblance with a familiar face. Once their secret was exposed, the creatures dropped the act like it was a live grenade and turned toward Scarlet. Long time no see, Scorpicor, they said in unison with a neutral voice. You might just be what I need for my final breakthrough. Scarlet ignored the ramblings and focused on the voice. She was certain to have heard it in the past. With the pince-nez back on her face, she studied the creature's cores. Whoever is behind this, it's not Lith. That is not his voice nor his rings, and these creatures have 3 cores each, whereas Lith had a single hybrid core with multiple properties. She thought. The hybrids extended their arms to attack, but the group of survivors wasn't willing to chat, so they attacked the moment the eyes of Misanthropic stripped the creatures of their disguise. Killing a pile of random stuff was much easier than murdering your loved ones over and over again. The undead nature of the creatures made them incredibly sturdy, so that most spells had little to no effect on them. Darkness magic was their bane, but it was also slow, and very few creatures could use it aside from humans. That was why the group had formed and how they had survived for so long. The magical beasts would pin the enemies down to the ground, the humans would kill them with darkness magic, and the awakened plants would keep their allies alive without fail. Plants were the most gifted creatures in the rejuvenating arts. There was no injury they couldn't treat in a matter of seconds. By harnessing Mogur's life force, they could almost regrow an entire body with no burden on their patient's stamina. Yet that was before Scarlet's arrival. Now that she was the creature's target, the mastermind was no longer interested in capturing the others alive. Scarlet could see the chaos magic assembling on the creature's fingertips a second before they unleashed a barrage of black rays as fast as bullets. A wave of her hand enveloped the group of survivors in a dome of light that stopped the chaos spells. Chaos magic could destroy matter almost to the atomic level, but light magic was its fatal weakness. Chaos magic was nothing but darkness magic that had been forcefully stripped of its light counterpart. It was the imbalance that made chaos magic so powerful. The raw darkness magic was drawn by the light element residing inside its target, making it fast. Also, the darkness magic would drain the light element to return whole, amplifying darkness magic's destructive force several times. A light magic energy construct would restore the balance, turning chaos magic back into common darkness magic. Your version of Hollow Void is truly amateurish. It didn't put a dent in my source wall, Scarlet said. Her aim was to taunt her opponent into revealing their identity. No matter how hard she racked her brain, she had met too many people to remember them all. Chapter 6:21. You've grown stupid with age, the creatures said with a stern tone while charging at the source wall. Your barrier just traps my prey, preventing them from both escaping and retaliating. On top of that, only abominations need to feed on life force. For the undead, light magic it's nothing but a full-course meal. Scarlet could see the creature's blood cores going into overdrive, lured by the spell's energy mass. If you say so. Scarlet snapped her fingers, turning the source wall into night wall. The creatures slammed into the mass of darkness energy, which destroyed their blood cores and made their bodies crumble. Without the blood core's energy keeping the other two apart, the black core was free to feast on the mana core first and on the mud puppet holding it in later. What a moron. Darkness and light are 2 faces of the same coin. Converting one in the other is a child's play if you know what you're doing. I can rule out my most brilliant acquaintances from my suspect list, she thought. Okay, it's time you get out of here. Scarlet opened a warp steps leading a dozen of kilometers away. Those things were all linked to the forest, so the further you go, the weaker they'll become. Keep walking straight past the steps, and you should reach a village by nightfall. The magical beasts took the others on their backs and ran through the dimensional door while giving the Scorpicore a nod of their heads as a thank you. They were grateful to Scarlet, but also aware that they were nothing but a liability to her. Ants caught in the middle of a fight between titans who could stomp them without even noticing. Now that Scarlet had the enemy's energy signature stored by the eyes of Mina Dion, she had no more need to guess the identity of her opponent, she just needed to reach them. Her pince-nez had allowed her to track Balkier despite he was hiding in the Blood Desert, and she was in the Griffin Kingdom, whereas the new hybrid behind the mud puppets was just a few kilometers away. Their life force shone like a sun to her eyes, allowing her to fly in a straight line at subsonic speed until she reached her destination. It was a cave, located at the base of a hill. Once it had been covered in grass and flowers, but now the whole area was a wasteland full of dead trees. Her pince-nez could only pick up 3 different energy signatures, and they were all hybrids. This smell? Zacha, is it really you? Now that most of the smells were gone, and with the hybrid so close, Scarlet's nose could easily perceive the familiar scent, which in turn jogged her memory. Zacha was an emperor beast, even older than Scarlet was. In a sense, Scarlet considered her almost as a relative. Zacha was the mother of all news, a feline species of emperor beasts. She had the head of a monkey, the body of a tiger, the wings of an eagle, and the front half of a snake for a tail. Both the new and the Scorpicore were chimeras, sharing light magic as one of two innate elements. The other one was fire for the Scorpicore and air for the new. How could you do something so cruel to your own home? To yourself? Have you gone insane? Scarlet asked. She remembered the new being a gentle and kind soul, to the point that she had refused to take the mantle of Lord of the Forest because of her hate for violence. I have no idea how you could find me so quickly, but it doesn't matter. Zacha's voice wasn't feminine anymore. It was the flat and cold tone of an undead who didn't care for their past anymore. As for your question, what kind of mother would let her children starve? The creature that came out of the cave barely resembled the emperor beast that Scarlet remembered. Zacha had now a horned skull for a head, her body had turned white snow, and she was capable of standing on her hind legs 3 meters, 9 feet 10 inches, tall, having become more humanoid than before. Zacha's empty eye sockets were lighted by red, undead energy. I don't know what you are talking about, but nothing justifies such a blatant abuse of forbidden magic. Scarlet's eyes became stone cold as she guessed what kind of changes had Zacha put herself through. It's not forbidden magic if it's done for the greater good. All kinds of creatures will be able to benefit from my discovery. Normally, a mana and a black core cannot coexist, but what happens if you add blood core? Being made of darkness magic, a blood core can withstand the chaos of the black core, while its red part made of pure life force can nurture a weakened mana core, prolonging its existence. What I found it's the cure for all illnesses. Something so great that it can defeat death itself. This is my legacy for all of our children, who will be able to thrive as perfect life forms. The only problem is that both the black and blood core need a lot of energy, but I'm certain that with enough time I will be able to solve this issue as well. Zacha said, Are you out of your mind? Your current form is far from perfect. To survive just for a few months, you have killed thousands and completely destroyed the balance of the forest. Mogr will not allow this. Foolish cat. Mogr doesn't care about any of it. Otherwise, how could it let so many bad things happen? Why abominations and undead are the only ones allowed to live forever, while all the other creatures live a life of pain before dying? Zacha asked. I could tell you that pain is a constant of life, and that the immortality you envy so much has a heavy price, but I'm tired of listening to your nonsense. Haven't you? Scarlet had hoped to appeal to whatever good there might be left in the new, but after seeing the monstrosities Zacha had turned herself into, she had given up. She used that time to cast her light sovereign array. It projected a white 6-pointed star inscribed in a white circle that filled its area of effect with the light element, so that using chaos magic was impossible. On top of that, it created a natural source of light energy that allowed Scarlet to skip conjuring energy and go straight to manipulate it, making her casting speed much faster. Unfortunately, the new was on her same page and had used that time to cast more than just an array. To turn herself into a hybrid, Zacha had used forbidden magic and sacrificed countless lives. It had allowed her to merge her body with part of an abomination and a grave lord she had raised with necromancy. She now had 3 different minds capable of parallel thought, resulting in triple casting. The new unleashed the life suppression array while her abomination side cast the tier 3 chaos magic void rain. Void rain produced a volley of chaos arrows as fast as bullets, but because of Light Sovereign's effect, they immediately turned back into slow darkness projectiles. Only thanks to her array did Scarlet have the time to block them by conjuring stone shields with a wave of her hand. Chapter 622. Life suppression, however, was a tougher client. It conjured a black 5-pointed star inscribed in a red circle, which allowed the person at its center to feed on the energy the array drained from everything inside its area of effect. Scarlet inwardly cursed as she realized that both her array and her life force were being turned against her, making the new even more powerful. Yes, I knew it. You are the key to my research. Zacha said as the flood of nutrients made the hunger that had tormented her ever since her metamorphosis disappear. Black flames erupted from her neck, enveloping her skull as her body started to mutate once again. What goes around comes around, pal. Scarlet reacted quickly, turning her light sovereign into its darkness magic counterpart. Normally, she would have suffered from its deadly effects as well, but thanks to life suppression, all of its energy was redirected to the new. The black flames disappeared as the hybrid started to wither. Life suppression injected the poisonous darkness energy directly into Zacha's cores, making it spread like wildfire. No, all the life force I have collected. Lost. Darkness magic was the bane of both undead and abominations. Zacha could feel her blood and black core weakening as the darkness magic seeped through them until it almost reached her mana core. Her tail fell onto the ground, turning into specks of darkness before fading into nothingness. Look at yourself and at what you have become. Do you understand now? Abominations and undead leave no corpse behind because they are simply shadows of their former self. If there's anything left in you of the kind I knew, let me give you a painless death. Scarlet said, dispelling Shadow Sovereign a second after Zacha did the same for life suppression. Shut up. What good is a mother who can't protect her own children? I refuse to die. The sky blackened and the earth trembled. A black pillar descended from the thunderclouds that were blotting the sun and enveloped the new. Do you see it? Moger agrees with me. This is my world tribulation. The planet still considers me one of its guardian candidates. Dark clouds gathered and spun around the two emperor beasts as Zacha's form became covered in black scales. You're only half right, Scarlet said. The black pillar is just a sign that Moger has relinquished any hope for you. You're turning into an eldritch, and there's no way back from that. You're right about the tribulation part, though. Only it's not yours. Scarlet was forced back into her bestial form, and then her body started to change, doubling its size. Her fur morphed into red scales as thick as a shield, and a new set of feathered wings appeared on the Scorpicore's back right beside her membranous ones. Her muzzle turned into a mask of fire. Only her eyes remained visible. Scarlet's red mane erupted into a raging purple flame, hot enough to blacken the ground below her. The Emperor Beast roared as she attacked the Eldritch with her claws. The two creatures rolled on the ground, spraying red or black blood whenever one of them managed to wound her opponent. Soon Scarlet realized her mistake. Her fangs and claws were as sharp as those of the Eldritch, but she lacked the deadly touch such creatures possessed. Each wound Zacha's new body inflicted to Scarlet would also drain her life force, mending the Eldritch's wounds. The scorpion sting at the end of Scarlet's tail stung Zacha multiple times. At such close range, neither of them could cast spells, and the Eldritch was quickly getting the upper hand since she could heal and attack at the same time. What good is venom against someone who has no blood? You took everything from me, so I will slowly savor your death. In her Eldritch form, Zacha's heart was quickly being replaced by the hunger that plagued all abominations. She was aware that after killing Scarlet, her own cubs would be her next prey. She was too hungry to care anymore for such a dead weight. Her mind was becoming colder and more calculative by the second. It's all Scarlet's fault. If not for her meddling, I would still be anew. All of my hard work is ruined. Zacha's train of thought was interrupted by a sudden burst of pain coming from her back. A Scorpicore's tail didn't inject venom. Plants, undead, abominations, there were too many creatures that would be immune to such a weapon. Acid, on the other hand, worked the same way on all kinds of enemies. The surprise made the Eldritch falter long enough for Scarlet to escape from her deadly embrace and take flight. She was bleeding from multiple deep wounds, and her red scales had been blackened by the Eldritch's parasitic touch. That does it. Moger is truly a scumbag. How can it give Zacha a power-up, turning her into an Eldritch in the middle of our fight while giving a tribulation to me? Not only does it not give me a single advantage, but also if I fail it, I'll die, no matter the result of the fight. Scarlet thought, using light fusion to treat her wounds. Zacha was still getting used to her new body, but since air was one of her innate elements, she was able to fly better than Scarlet. The Scorpicore only had the time to wave a single spell before the enemy caught up with her. Damn if I miss my pants, Ness. It would help me to understand how much power Zacha has left. Too bad that chaos magic is too dangerous. If I take any artifact out of my pocket dimension, I risk it getting destroyed. I only have one trick left at this point. Scarlet kept dodging and stinging with her tail at her opponent, trying to stall for time as long as she could. Eldritchs were indeed powerful, but because of their hunger, they consumed mana even while standing still. They needed a constant supply of energy to survive, so during such a heated battle, a newborn Eldritch like Zacha couldn't last long. She had yet to learn how to use her new abilities to their fullest. Zacha was well aware that the tables had been turned. Each sting of Scarlet's tail opened a new wound, making her hunger worse. In the few seconds they had played airborne tag, she had consumed a lot of vitality just to keep up with her opponent's speed. Zacha was eager to finish the duel and find something to eat. She focused her remaining energies into a full-powered Tier 4 Chaos Magic spell, Hollow Void. The black spear erupted the moment Scarlet was forced to slow down to avoid a patch of tall trees. At such a close range, the spell was unavoidable. Finally, here's my chance, Scarlet thought as she unleashed a powerful Tier 4 spell, Light Pillar. For a split second, the two spells clashed, and Howling Void easily pierced through Construct, but Scarlet was expecting that. She reversed the light into darkness, so that the opponent's chaos magic stripped her own spell of its light element, turning the Howling Void into normal darkness magic and vice versa. Thanks to her ruse, Zacha had unwillingly turned Scarlet's Dark Pillar into a chaos spell. The huge energy mass was too big and too fast to dodge. The Eldritch took the full force of the Chaos Pillar, dying on the spot. Chapter 6:23. Scarlet didn't fare much better. Darkness magic was slow, but she was still close to its source, and she was wounded. She managed to only partially dodge the incoming attack and crashed to the ground with half of her side destroyed by Zacha's spell. She gritted her teeth to not lose consciousness and used invigoration to escape from the jaws of death. After she recovered from her wounds, Scarlet was surprised to notice that she was still in her pseudo-guardian form. She waited to be back to her peak condition before taking the eyes of Mina Dion out of her pocket dimension. Much to her surprise, the artifact could still perceive Zacha's life force running under the Galuan forest in the form of an intricate network of hybrid tentacles. They were all converging into the cave from which the Mad New had emerged. Scarlet stepped inside the cave, finally able to make sense of Zacha's ramblings about her offspring. In the middle of the cave, inside two gelatinous pods, there were the remains of two small gnus. The tendrils that Scarlet had seen and fought up to that point were coming out of the pods, providing the cubs with a constant flow of nutrients. They were the size of 10-year-old child, but they were skeletal and on the verge of death. Up until Zacha's death, the tendrils had harvested life force just to keep them alive. Thanks to her pince-nez, Scarlet could see a black core inside their bodies. Somehow it had taken a deep root, to the point that without it the small gnus wouldn't be able to survive. They must have been infected during the monster outbreak. Scarlet pondered. Judging from what I see, the abomination must have been killed before its seeds could properly develop. Once the creature died, Zacha's children must have started to slowly die due to the black core fading. Emperor beasts have an amazing vitality, but in this case, it would be a curse. It must have taken them weeks to get to this point. Weeks during which Zacha could only watch them suffer. It must have driven her mad. Scarlet was really close to the truth. The creatures involved in the so-called monster outbreak weren't actually monsters, just abominations hidden behind a meat mask. One of them managed to spread its disease to some of the creatures of the forest before being captured. When Zacha had realized her cubs were among the victims, she had begged the Lord of the Forest, Mishra the Unicorn, to spare the abomination, to keep it alive long enough for her to safely extract the black cores, or at least find a cure for her cub's condition. Yet Mishra refused. She knew that any attempt would have been pointless, that a corrupted core was beyond saving, and that leaving the abomination alive would only mean giving it more chances of escape. Zacha wasn't the only one struck by that tragedy, but unlike the other parents, she couldn't find the strength to put her down her small, innocent pups. She had used all the ingredients she had, all the artifacts she possessed just to buy them one more week, then one more day until she struggled to prolong their lives of even 1 second. It was then that her mind had snapped, making her turn to forbidden magic to solve her problem. The other beasts called it madness, But to Zacha, it was an epiphany. If they needed the black core to survive, then she only needed to find a way to make it thrive. The answer was so simple that she almost couldn't believe it. Her research needed test subjects, but luckily the forest was full of life. When Misher had realized what was happening, it was too late. Zacha's hybrid form, fueled by her madness and countless sacrifices, proved to be too strong for her. Scarlet watched at the pods and at their content. Her heart ached at the idea of killing such helpless creatures, but she had no choice. Even if she managed to somehow stabilize their condition, those hybrids were cursed to experience the worst of their three worlds. Like an undead, they would never physically grow. Like an abomination, they would live in perpetual hunger. Last, but not least, it was only a matter of time before they regained some form of consciousness and either committed suicide or fell into desperation once they understood how cruel their destiny was. Through the gel of the pods, Scarlet could hear their small voices moaning in pain, their bodies squirming now that Zacha's death had stopped the tendrils from working. She had no idea what kind of magic the new had used, and the young creatures were in agony. A wave of her pawn released enough darkness magic to shut down their pain receptors before giving them a peaceful death. They didn't even notice it. Scarlet made sure to make them fall asleep before putting them out of their misery. Only after the last hybrid was dead did the sky clear and the earth cease its trembling. Wait, what? Wasn't the tribulation about killing Zacha, but releasing the cubs? Then why did nothing happen when I met Lith? He's a hybrid too, but Moger didn't want me to put him down. Isn't he supposed the potential guardian of death or something? Then what am I? Her streak of unanswered questions was interrupted by an all-too-familiar feeling. It was like a stomach ache, but worse. As if instead of bile, she had to puke molten lava. No, please, not now. I've waited for over 100 years for my core to evolve, and it happens now. I'm never coming back to the Gorgon Empire. This place is bad luck. Scarlet thought as the impurities accumulated inside her body over the years were expelled. The pain she was experiencing made the fight with Zacha look like a pleasant experience. A few weeks had passed since Lith had resumed his duty as a ranger. Lucia was already free from snow and bad weather, whereas spring had yet to reach the Keller region. After the events of Xantia, everything became quiet. Despite the chilly winds and black clouds on the horizon, the Northmen could see all the signs that announced the end of winter. Days would pass now between snowstorms, and the bad weather would last hours instead of days. Soon the roads would be open again, and supplies wouldn't be an issue anymore. Rich and poor alike could plan their tomorrow without fear, so there wasn't much for Lith to do. He had often the time to visit Camilla and his parents, but most importantly, he had received full access to some of the most important libraries of the kingdom. It allowed him to gain a complete understanding of the basics of higher necromancy and to learn all about the known undead species. Fuck, Lith said with a dejected voice, drawing on himself several looks of reproach. He had searched for years for that knowledge, working day and night for the Griffin Kingdom to get his hands on everything known to mankind about undeath. It was a vital step in his research to escape from the cycle of death of rebirth that had worried him since his reincarnation on Moger. Like if often happens, the answers he got weren't the ones he had hoped for. Chapter 624. Thanks to all the merits he had racked during the past year, Lith had been granted access to the Royal Library. It was the biggest and most complete library in the Griffin Kingdom, covering all the subjects known to mages, including the forbidden ones. The library was comprised of many floors, one for each element. Normal books could be checked out freely, whereas to consult forbidden books it was necessary to spend merits and receive a recommendation letter from someone with a high clearance level. In Lith's case, both Professor Marth and Vaster had vouched for him along with his commanding officer. Lith was now sitting behind at a hardwood table, surrounded by fellow mages in search of knowledge. The city of Vailron, the capital of the Griffin Kingdom, was surrounded by all kinds of protective arrays, and because of them, Lith couldn't put the valuable tomes inside Solaspedia to read them all in a single moment. Dimensional magic would allow spies and thieves to freely warp, so it had been sealed. Lith and Solus had spent the last few hours reading tomes about necromancy, to see if among the undead species there was one suitable for Lith's tastes. Unfortunately, despite having even checked the legendary creatures section, their quest had ended up in failure. Sigh, Why real vampires suck so bad. They have so many limitations that now I can understand why, despite becoming a vampire is relatively safe and easy, no mage wants to be turned into one. Lith thought. Please, if there was such a thing as an immortal and eternally young species that had no weakness at all, outside becoming a disco ball under the sunlight, they would have ruled Mogar for millennia. Solus said, yet despite her mockery, she was dejected as well. As long as Lith was human and with a cracked life force at that, he was bound to die sooner or later. Solus had no intention of letting that happen, but just like Lith, she was now clutching at straws. According to the tomes of the Royal Library, there was a way for Lith to safely become an undead and retain all of his memories. Unlike necromancy, that worked on corpses that no longer had a working brain and mana core, many species of undead could slowly turn a living being into one of their own. In such a case, the subject would never really die. A blood core would take form inside their bodies and grow over time, replacing their mana core the moment their heart ceased to beat. The problem was that there was no undead species without absurd or crippling limitations. Most of them were unable to even move during the day, trapped in a forced slumber no matter the danger they were in or how deep below the earth they hid. Others, like the banshees, couldn't cross water and would die if they fell into a river or a lake. Yet their biggest weakness was their inability to use light magic. For someone like Lith, who had spent countless hours to become a healer, it was an unacceptable trait. To make matters worse, light magic wasn't just needed to heal others. Without it, Lith would also be unable to forge master truly powerful artifacts, and even to use dimensional magic as freely as he had always done. Blink, one of his bread and butter spells during fights, required light magic, and so did Switch. Undead weren't completely unable to use light magic, but since their blood core was unable to assimilate it from its surroundings, they had to consume their own life force in order to produce light energy. It meant that if Lith decided to turn into an undead, just to forge master a single item, he would need to consume the equivalent of a pigpen of food. Some undead were picky about who they could feed upon, and of course, their victim had to be alive. Lith couldn't store living humans inside his pocket dimension, and he couldn't bear the thought of traveling with a caravan of slaves. He would have to feed and care for them every day just to murder them later. I can be morally flexible, sure, but where the heck do I keep so many people at all times without being found out and hunted down? Liches have no such problems, but after reading a lot about them, I don't think it's something I'd like to become. First, there is no surefire way to become one. I would need to spend years to find a way suitable for my unique mana core and life force, just for a measly 10% success rate, with no do-overs. My luck always sucked, so I don't feel like playing with dice. Also, the phylactery is a huge weak point. It cannot be stored in a dimensional item, and it can't be too far. On top of that, after meeting Zalgrish, I discovered another weak point liches have. If I conceal space with an array and I cut them off from the link with their phylactery, both their physical and magical strength will be halved, plus they would become unable to recover their mana. Lith thought, not knowing he had just discovered the principle underlying Ligane's anti-lich spell. Unless they bring it with them. Solus pointed out, that's too risky. Life vision, your mana sense, Scarlet's pants ness. There are countless ways to spot such a powerful object, and even if the lich might somehow cloak it, the constant stream of mana and life force would betray its position. Lith was right, yet most ancient liches would rather bring their phylactery around with them while fighting a truly dangerous opponent than being one-shot. I can definitely discard becoming an undead as an option, unless I'm either desperate if I discover a new species with acceptable limits. Creating a new race all by myself might as well take all the lifespan I've left, and I would have no certainty of success. He thought, I don't like the idea of turning into an abomination either. They may be immortal, but so far all the ones I met seem to be mad, miserable, or both. My best shot is to research ways to improve my life force to prolong my existence while I search for the blueprints of a soul-binding artifact. After copying everything he might need to improve his true necromancy, Lith left the Royal Library. Both of his communication amulets were silent, but in his experience, no news were good news. If the army kept not bothering him, Lith could keep exploring the lost cities of the Keller region for clues, whereas not hearing from both his family and Camilla meant that Falmug had yet to try anything funny. Lith would have loved to stop torturing him and take him out of the picture once and for all, but he had to play it smart so that no one would suspect him. Thanks to the tower warp, he had never left his prey alone for long. Lith let those morbid thoughts slide and used the capital's gate to return to the north. Despite all of its flaws, the army was still the perfect cover to spend a long time away, performing his research night and day. Among his most recent pet projects, there was crafting with the eyes of the Baylor a magical staff that could mimic General Vorga's. Improving the power of the lesser undead, he was able to create at will and raid the lost city of Huriol. Unlike the other ruins he had visited, Huriol was almost perfectly preserved. Gold, jewels, magic books. There were countless things up for the taking. Unluckily, the creatures inhabiting the city made every raid extremely difficult. Chapter 625. Litha's predecessors hadn't left all that goodies out of the goodness of their hearts. Finding something valuable inside Huriol required luck, plus one had to fight not only against powerful monsters, but also against time. The lost city was a living labyrinth that would periodically rearrange itself, making any old map useless. To make matters worse, its walls couldn't be affected by earth magic, dimensional magic was sealed, and destroying the walls to make haste only made the cursed item that ruled Huriol angry. Normally, the problem with the inhabitants of a lost city was that they would grow in power and numbers over time. It was a ranger's duty to cull them and reset their power before they became too strong. In Huriol's case, however, the number of creatures that spawned and their power was fixed. Even the monsters had a hard time finding their way out of the city, and Lith only had to kill those who managed to reach the external barrier before they could breach it. From the outside, the lost city looked like a giant stone dome. The only entrances were located at the ground level, and breaking the dome would make the cursed object who protected the city turn the whole Huriol into a rampaging golem. Flight was useless as well, making many wonder what lay at the center of the city and for what purpose it had been built. Lith couldn't stop thinking how odd it was that rangers were allowed to take for themselves whatever they recovered from it. Huriol was also nicknamed the Cursed Training Ground. Lith used his badge to bypass the magical barrier isolating the city and check the reset counter. The labyrinth would randomize itself at fixed intervals, so he had to make sure that it wouldn't happen any soon. Otherwise, if a combat lasted for too long, or if he managed to get deep into Huriol, Lith would risk becoming trapped inside the city. According to the counter, the next reset was in half a day, so Lith went directly inside. I swear, this place is oddly familiar. The rooms are always different, but the vibe here is something I already experienced somewhere else. Lith thought while crossing a small courtyard, where several training dummies and weapons were orderly lined up. A quick check with life vision confirmed to him that there was nothing valuable. The only magical aura in the room belonged to the walls encasing the courtyard. Solus used her spirit magic to pick up the weapons and use them to strike down the dummies. Why did you do that? Lith asked as the last strawman was cut into half. Cursed training ground, training dummies. I thought maybe there was a reward for clearing the task. She replied, yeah, if this was a video game, you might be right. Real life is a bit different though. No one rewards you for completing menial tasks. Litha's voice oozed with sarcasm. The following room looked like a warehouse of some kind. Wooden cupboards and shelves were lined against the wall, while multiple vases filled with food lay around, enchanted with an unknown spell that prevented it from rotting. Jackpot, Lith thought. I've never seen this kind of pseudo-core before. I wonder if I'm the first to. A quick use of invigoration made him lose interest. Damn, the pseudo-core it's too complex compared to a dimensional item. This thing is worthless to me. Lith still copied it down to the smallest detail, just to be safe. Fake mages couldn't scan magical items as he had just done, and even if such a spell was of no use to Lith, the kingdom might have been interested in buying it from him. The shelves in the room had several books, but after a quick glance, they turned out to be either inventory or account books. Lith opened the door leading to the next room, surprised that he had yet to find a crossroad or a monster. Up to that point, his path had only one way in and one way out, making a map pointless. The outer layers have always been easy, but never this simple. If it keeps like this, I could get really deep into Huriol. Why is my paranoia sense tingling, though? Lith thought. Well, maybe because if it's easy to get in, then it's also easy to get out? It's not like this place is inhabit. Thanks, Solus. Way to jinx it, Lith said as he stepped inside what looked like a dorm, running into a mage slayer and a white lady. They were two kinds of undead who were able to stay awake during the day, as long as they avoided direct sunlight. Unfortunately for Lith, all the light inside Huriol was artificial, so that his enemies could move without problems. A mage slayer was usually born from the dying body of a powerful swordsman. In their new form, they would be unable to use fake magic, but their undead nature combined with their skills allowed them to channel the elemental energy into their swordplay. They weren't true mages, but they were able to cast spells without any chant or hand signs. They just needed to perform a series of attacks to unleash all kinds of elemental attacks up to Tier 3. On top of that, magic was their source of nourishment, making all kinds of direct spells useless against them, no matter their tier. Both fake and true mages had a hard time facing someone with infinite stamina that could use magic by simply swinging their blades in close combat. The mage slayer in front of Lith looked like a featureless humanoid mass of orange gas wielding a longsword covered in runes of power. Its red eyes were fixated on him, seething with hunger. Inside the borders of Huriol, all the creatures the labyrinth spawned couldn't die, but that didn't mean that they would be freed from their needs. Why is its sword covered in runes? Aren't they supposed to disappear after the forge mastering process ends? Solus thought, glad to have the opportunity to share part of her memories without giving out her secret. Why is your sword covered in runes? Lith asked with a sarcastic voice, talking to Solus more than to the mage slayer. The creature rushed at Lith, its blade slashing the air in front of itself to unleash a fireball. Sorry, Solus. It says it doesn't feel ready to share on a first date. Lith thought while clapping his hands. It conjured a spinning air dome that sucked the fireball and deflected it against the white lady. Born from the corpse of a woman who had killed her own children, white ladies were capable of using only two elements, water and darkness. They needed to feed on the life force of children, and they extracted it by drowning them. The undead was wearing a tattered wedding gown. The pristine white of the dress emphasized her gray necrotic flesh. Due to the prolonged lack of food, the white lady was unable to retain her humanoid physical appearance and was reduced to a zombie-like creature. Yet her hunger didn't diminish her magical powers one bit. She hurled a powerful stream of water that enveloped the fireball and snuffed it out like it was a candle. The white lady shrieked in anger while looking at her companion with so much anger that Lith hoped she would attack the mage slayer.